All right, so I think technically you need to call the meeting back to order.
Yes, I call the meeting back to order.
All right, so I'm going to start presenting again here. Let's see. I have to rearrange my screen after I did that. Okay, so can you see the next one up? So the question I have for you all right now is when is your, you just adopted your new board meeting calendar for next year. When do you have your meetings?
Second Tuesdays.
Second Tuesday. You know what? I had Tuesday in there and I changed it because for some reason I thought it was wrong. So second Tuesday, do you start closed session generally before your meetings or after your regular meetings?
After we start at 5, and then normally we go into a closed session right after formalities of,
So your regular meeting starts at 5 usually?
yes.
Okay. So let me ask a question. Why do you have closed session after your regular meeting as opposed to before?
We start the regular meeting, then we adjourn to closed session, then we come back into open session.
Okay, so your regular meeting, so you always have to open with an open session before going into closed session. So that's correct by the Brown Act. Do you ever talk about any business prior to going into closed session?
It has varied. Sometimes sometimes we have put closed session after all the reports and whatnot. I don't know the reason why, except for sometimes we have visitors that are out of town needing to do presentations, like our auditors and whatnot. And we don't like to keep them sitting here in February in the snow, late night going back over the hill.
Sure, that makes
So
sense. So do you have a set time that your regular meeting starts after closed session, or do you cover business in closed session and it's whenever you finish your closed session time, your regular meeting starts?
whenever we finish closed session,
Have you
that's the way it has been, although it's not always the most convenient.
Have you thought about picking a specific time that your regular open session starts and then trying to backwards map your closed session based on how many items you think you have in closed session? And so let me give an example for that. Let's say you want your regular meetings to start at 6 o'clock. And so you provide direction to Jen that we'll start the open session at whatever time you think based on how many closed session items you have. So if I was Jen, I would know at the agenda review prior to the meeting how many closed session items I have generally. And I would know whether that's going to take 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or 90 minutes. And then you would always target that around whatever time you want your regular meeting to start. The advantage of that is your public knows always what time you're going to start your open session. And then if Jen messes up and her timing is off, you just adjourn your closed session and you continue it after your open session. Again, the advantage of it is that, and so you don't have a group full or a room full of people who are waiting for you to get out of closed session because you said your meeting started at 5 and they don't know exactly what time you're going to start. Is that something of interest to you, or do you like the way you're doing it now?
I think it's something of interest. I don't like keeping people waiting and they don't know what time and they're waiting and waiting and waiting. That part I personally have never liked. So I'm open for a different method if we can help regulate that.
Okay,
I think that,
we lost Kadusha.
oh, Kadusha, I think that having dinner complicates matters.
So I'm gonna talk about dinner in a second.
Okay,
So don't even pay any attention to dinner yet. I just want to talk about what time you want to start open session. And I would suggest, because it does two things, if you pick a time, number one, it provides your public with that. Number two, if you've got a hot topic item, you don't increasingly frustrate your public because they're sitting there waiting for you to get out of closed session. Number three, it allows you to schedule your guest presenters that drive over the hill, your auditors, whatever, and you can move them towards the front of the session. Number four, it takes the pressure off of you in closed session to say, we got to get out of here. We got a bunch of people out here waiting. So you can focus on the items that you have in closed session. And so what I would suggest is that you pick a time that your open session starts. You tell me what time you want that to be. And then you backwards map your closed session on that.
Now, we still have to have public comment on closed session items before we go into closed session.
That is accurate, yep. And so anybody that had a public comment on a closed session item would need to show up at whatever time your closed session started. But that's generally not very many people. Your public comment, I would assume, is 99% for the regular meeting.
That's probably accurate.
So my proposal, I think you all heard my proposal. Is that something you're interested in doing, or do you want to keep it just like it is?
okay, so can you repeat your proposal?
My proposal is that you pick a time to start your regular meetings, and that becomes your meeting time from this point forward for all of your regular meetings. And then you ask Jen to tell you each month what time closed session will start based on the load that is there for closed session. And so 1 month you may start your closed session at 4:30. Let's say you do a 6 o'clock start time. 1 month you may start your closed session at 4:30. 1 month you might start at 5:30 because there's hardly anything to talk about. 1 month you might start at 5, but your open session would be consistently at 6 o'clock each time. So your public would know if you want to talk to the board, you show up to the boardroom at 6 o'clock and they'll be there.
That makes sense. That I understand now about the closed session. We can change the times of the closed session for whenever before the meeting. That makes sense.
And you will have public comment before that, or?
Well, I would suggest that you have public comment on closed session items before that. And then you have your regular public comment at the big meeting.
Okay.
Is that something you want to do? Is that so? Thumbs up if that's good. Thumbs sideways if you can live with it. Kadusha, are you on the same page with us right now? I know you're reconnecting. You're good? Okay. All right. So looks like with Laura Lee, I don't, where are you at on this one?
So I'm, like I said, I had a vet, kind of whatever the group is conceding to, I'm fine with that.
Laura Lee, are you there?
I'm trying to phone in on my phone to get the audio. It's just crinkly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might actually be a good solution if you got the audio, excuse me, audio on your phone and just mute it there and you can listen and see the presentation there. Okay, so what that means is board meetings will be on the second Tuesday of each month. Each meeting will begin with a closed session. And I'm just gonna put, what time do you want the regular public meeting to start? Let me ask that question first before I do that.
I would say 6.
6? that good with everyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
6.
Okay, can you put at approximately 5 PM or earlier?
Well, it could be later, because if you have hardly anything to discuss, like our last board meeting here, we had literally 30 minutes of stuff to discuss. And so we didn't come in until 30 minutes before. And the reason I would say that you want to be careful about that is if you only have 30 minutes worth of stuff to discuss, do you want to be hanging around in there for an hour waiting for the board meeting time to come? Or do you want her to schedule it at, say, 5:30? What's your preference?
Oh, but my question is what if the closed session stuff is going to last longer and that would be at 4:30?
I think this would address that and it would be fine.
Okay.
So let's talk about dinner for a second. How long is one of your board meetings generally?
We have a cutoff time of 10 o'clock unless the board says to continue on.
Okay, but so generally, how long though is a meeting? What would you say an average?
9:30.
Okay, so you start right now with a closed session at 5 o'clock and you go till 9:30.
Yeah.
So that is 4.5 hours.
Yeah. And I have to say that sometimes our board meetings, when we used to be in person and we'd have to travel to Wichpec or Pequon or Orleans, sometimes we had long board meetings. There were occasions when we went until midnight. We are trying to cut that out now.
Okay.
That's why we have the approval of the board to extend the meeting.
So my point being with that is how many of you drive, you just said that you drive out to a location. How many of you have to drive an hour to get to the board meeting location sometimes?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
How many of you leave right after work in order to make it to the board meeting, or are going to have to leave right after work in order to make it to the board meeting?
If you're retired, you don't.
Right? But not all of you are retired.
That's right.
And so my point is this: how can you function as a board member after driving for an hour to a board meeting, sitting through a 4.5 hour board meeting, and not having a meal?
That's why we had to have approval of the board members to extend the board meeting past 10.
I would suggest, and I've done this in multiple districts now and it's worked out very well, is we work with our child nutrition services to provide us a meal. And you can do it in one of a couple ways. They can provide you what the students are eating. That gives you an opportunity to talk to your constituents that you're actually eating the same meals as the students. You can talk to them about the quality of food that's being served. You can talk to them about meals. So if someone comes and complains to you about what's being served in the cafeteria, you can talk to them about what you've been eating. It gives you a personal experience with that. Or your child nutrition, your food services, whatever you call it, can make you a meal. And they can highlight something special that they do inside their group, and it gives you an opportunity to bond with some of your child nutrition folks.
We actually do that when we're in person. We do that.
Oh, great. Great. So I would encourage that to be delivered at your closed session. You break bread together as a board. That's healthy as well. You have a full stomach, so when you go out into open session, and you can address your constituents out in the open session and have a clear head. And so that's my proposal by dinner being provided.
Yes, that's what we do.
Okay, so you already do that. Great. So I'm going to leave that in there. So the next question is, do you have study sessions? Do you know what a study session is?
Well, I have my perception of what it is, but maybe you need to tell us what it is.
A study session is this right here. And a study session can also be, let's say you're working on, let's go back to the music program. You're working on developing what you want to do with the music program at the high school, and you're interested in a different conversation with your constituents than a conversation that can be had in a regular board meeting. In a regular board meeting, we already established the protocols that public comment is limited to 3 minutes, 20 minutes total. Once you've reached that time, you're going to summarize what you heard, and then as a board, you're going to deliberate. A study session is a much less formal type situation where you really want the input of stakeholders as a board, and you really want to be able to have an in-depth conversation about something, and you want to be able to engage back and forth with your community and have more of a back and forth conversation because the topic really lends itself to that. And so before a meeting, you could schedule a study session, which generally will not have any action items in it, for you to learn about something or study something more in depth. Is that something of interest to all of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be, that would be very helpful.
You're echoing, Laura Lee.
Laura Lee, you can discuss on your phone, dial *6, and then you can use your audio through your phone.
So I think what you would need to do if you do that is if you turn down the volume on your computer, I think that's what the echoing is coming back and forth. So if you just listen to your phone rather than listening to your computer, it would probably stop you. Hi, Rob, how are you? I'm Fred Van Vleck.
Hi, pretty good.
Thanks for joining us.
So if we wanted to develop our vision, we could do that at those kinds of meetings too.
You wanted to develop your what? I'm sorry?
Vision.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a prime area for a study session. And what it does is it allows you as a board also to really control what type of topics, because there are going to be times when you want a tremendous amount of public input on something. And it allows you to do that in a different setting than in a board meeting, because what really confuses the public is if you move to these protocols and in one topic where you want a lot of input from the public and you want to talk back and forth, and then the next topic is different and you don't want all that input from the public and you don't want to talk back and forth like that, it just confuses them. And so if you create a situation where you want the interactive topics and you want to have that, and you do that in a study session, perhaps prior to your closed session, or maybe you do study sessions. Right now you meet on the second Tuesdays of each month for a board meeting. Maybe the fourth Tuesdays of each month could be reserved for a study session if you needed it, and you could call it as a special session. So is that something you can all work with? And you guys can develop the parameters of all those later as you go on, but I'm just going to leave it inside here that study sessions may be scheduled. Now you have an idea of what those are. Rob, just to catch you up to speed, what we're working on right now are the protocols for the district and how you are all each going to hold each other accountable as board members. And so in order to adopt a protocol, it takes a supermajority of the board. So 5 of you have to support it in order for it to be adopted. And so far, we've made it through pretty much everything with everybody supporting it. I think there might have been one where there's one person who dissented, but it's been pretty much everybody all on board. And so what I'll ask for, like for instance, on the one that's up on the screen right now, if you can support that, I'll ask if you can, yes, you can support it, give me a thumbs up. You can live with it, give me a thumbs sideways, or a thumbs down if you can't support this protocol right now. So I'm going to ask, can you support this protocol the way it sits right now? A thumbs up, sideways, or down? Okay, where are you at on that, Rob? So we have our 5, but I want to give Rob a second to catch up here if he has any questions. You good, Rob?
Good.
Is that a good? I'm not sure if you can hear me. Just acknowledge you can hear me. I'm not sure if Rob can hear us right now. All right, well, we have our
Can we
5.
respond in the chat?
That'll work fine too. I need to see if I can get, my problem is I'm not sure if I can get chat up while I'm in presentation mode. I'm gonna stop sharing for 1 second here and work on, see if I can't get chat up. Yeah, I can't, it won't allow me to have chat up and present at the same time. Unless Trish, you know some way to do that.
I do not.
Yeah, so
I can monitor for just dissenting votes.
sure, long as you let me know if everyone has responded in chat, that would be the main thing. I just won't be able to tell if everyone's responded or not. That's too bad that I can't see. Oh, here, wait, I might have found an option to make that happen. I found an option. I got a little window open with chat, so I will be able to monitor. Okay, so good, that'll work. All right, so here we go, on to our next one. Board meetings, let's see here. The design of the board agenda will follow historical structure utilized by the board. The design of the agenda may only be altered with the approval of the board. Where this comes from is we worked with my camera's off, that's not on purpose. We worked with a district that they had a new superintendent come in and thought they were just going to fix the board agenda. They didn't intentionally do it, but they intentionally changed it, but they didn't intentionally create controversy. And so they went in, changed the whole agenda, upset the whole board, and it created some rift between the superintendent and the board. So this just clarifies that the board's agenda is the board's agenda. And if a superintendent or somebody wants to change it, they just need to bring it to the board. Any issues or concerns with this?
We just changed the historical structure. So do you mean from going forward since the change we just made?
That would be
Baseline.
correct. So if you just made a change, that's considered the historical structure now. So in
Okay.
other words, Jen couldn't just show up at the meeting with a brand new model to the agenda without the board talking about and approving it. So thumbs up or a yes in the, what's easier for you guys? Thumbs up or yeses in the chat box? Easiest for me is thumbs up unless your camera doesn't work very good, so. Okay. We're getting the echoes. So do you want to respond in the chat and I'll watch in the chat for you? Does that work for you? We can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Lorley. I show that both your phone and your computer are muted right now.
Okay, can you hear me now, Fred?
Yes, and no echo. Very good.
Oh, thank heavens. I have a concern with our board structure. It's been changed, and I don't know if the board actually voted on the new structure with it all being automated, but I have a lot of concerns with it. So anytime it is changed, I think it needs to be approved by the board ahead of time. One of the concerns I have is that everything online, the whole agenda is online. And when we have these Zoom meetings, I can't read it online and participate in the Zoom. I'm not that technical advanced. The other thing is that there's so much waste of the paper. I think we're wasting reams on various pages. So I do think that the board does need to approve before any changes are made.
Okay, you got it. That's in the protocols now. So that'll have to happen if any changes are made. Okay, board members will review the information provided to them and be open to ongoing professional development and training. Can you support this one?
Yes.
See a thumbs up?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Trying to get there.
5. Okay. Any questions on that one? Board meetings in the agenda. Let me make this one just a touch bigger. The superintendent with the support staff will create each board agenda. In advance, the preparation of the board agenda, board members may request items to be placed on the agenda. The board president and the superintendent will discuss the contents of the agenda and the process that will be followed at the meeting in advance of the board meeting. So right now, your agenda review, is that just the president and Jen, or is it the president and the clerk, or if you have a vice president and Jen, how do you do that?
It's just,
It's
Meeting with the board president.
Have you considered ever adding a second person into that meeting? And the only reason I encourage that is because if you want to have someone who, maybe a vice president who assumably takes over in the absence of, do you have vice president?
The clerk steps up as the vice president.
So the advantage of that is if there's an issue and you have a regular meeting, the president can't make it, the clerk is prepared to take over the meeting and they've been through the agenda review. And so that's just a style question. If you want them there, great. If you don't, keep it as the board president.
Well, the board, go ahead, Sue.
Superintendent with support of the staff creates, in advance of the preparation of the board agenda, board members, does that mean any board member may request items? And do they request it of the board president, or do they request it of the superintendent?
Of the superintendent, because the superintendent will be the person who creates the agenda even prior to sitting down with the president.
And is there a certain amount of lead time required? So many days before the next board meeting?
Well, the Brown Act requires 72-hour notice of your agenda being publicized. So if you have a board meeting on a Tuesday, that board agenda assumably probably gets published on Friday afternoon. Is that accurate? And so if it gets published on Friday afternoon, there's probably an internal deadline for agenda items. Trish, what's your internal deadline for agenda items?
So I was trying to pull up the board policy so I could send it to everybody, but right now our policy is that all items are due at 5 p.m. the Tuesday prior to the board meeting.
So I would suggest if you want to add it in here, we could add at least 1 week prior to the board meeting if a board member wants to request that.
We do have a revision on the next agenda though, that the board's going to vote on.
What does that mean?
A revision to the timeline. So I think instead of the Tuesday before, it would be 10 days prior to the board meeting.
Well, who is suggesting that?
It was something that I had talked to Jen about.
I think one of the concerns we have is that the board gets these huge packets, sometimes 400 pages. And even though the agenda is posted and it's online, we don't get our hard copies till sometimes Monday. and to really give it the attention that it needs, and reading it and following up on things, it has been crippling our ability to get through it all. And I think, Sue, that was one of your concerns, I heard.
Yes, it was.
And the 10 days before the meeting, a lot of time that hamstrings some of the principals for getting things on for various field trips, etc. What does Eureka City Schools do? What are their timelines?
So we have a Thursday board meeting, and our board gets their packets the Friday before.
The board gets their packets the Friday before.
And our agenda is published the Friday before. We have a, Trish is going to kill me and Jen will kill me for this, but we have a very streamlined process, and it's taken me a long time to get that in place. You can get there. It'll take some work to get there, but it's not just Trish and Jen. They have to reach out to the other staff to make that happen. And so my suggestion would be that you provide some direction to Jen through these protocols on where you need to be, but you also give some grace in her getting there, because she has to change the culture of that happening. One of the cultural changes that took me some time in my district to make was that all presentations are available to the board prior to the board meeting at the same time the board pack goes out. So unless it's an emergency situation, like I'll give you an example. If we're doing our first interim report and we're waiting on the county to turn our first interim report and we don't have all the numbers, it's possible that the board wouldn't get that information until closer to the meeting. What the Brown Act requires is that the public and the board, if it's within the 72 hours of a meeting, both need to get that information at the same time. So in other words, if you're running late on getting your information from the county, which holds you up, you may provide your board and the public the information at the same time. You can't, however, provide the board with the information 72 hours in advance and not give it to the public until the meeting. So with all that being said, my only cabinet members in my district are allowed to present to the board, and their presentation are posted to the agenda ahead of time. They post their full presentation, and this was an effort to cut down the length of our board meetings. And then they minimize that full presentation to 3 or 4 of the most important slides. So the board gets the whole presentation ahead of time. They condense their presentation to 3 or 4 slides, and then they present that at the board meeting with the understanding that the board has reviewed that in advance. And if the board has a specific question about something that the cabinet member didn't present on but was in their presentation, then they would address that question. The reason we went down that road is because our board meetings, in my board's opinion, were too long. And they provided direction to us that no single staff report on any board item should exceed 10 minutes. So that was a mouthful. So the question is, where do you want to go with this? We have, all of my board receives their packets electronically with the exception of one. And so we have a mail service that brings that packet out to that board member. And that board member gets it on the Friday that we publish the agenda. How many of your how many of you all get a paper packet?
I request a paper packet because I like to write on it, and with these Zoom meetings, I don't have the capability of 2 screens at the same time and running a meeting and reading my notes, and it's just.
That wasn't judgmental at all. That's just figuring out, how do we, as a district, get you your paper packets so you have the time to review your paper packet. So that's why I was curious how many are getting. Carrie, you get paper packet as well?
Well, I was going to comment on that. We weren't getting paper packets for a while. We had been getting paper packets all the time, and all of a sudden, now we were just, it was just online, which I can read it online, but but like Laura Lee, I like to write on my paper packet, and because I'm the clerk, I print out the agenda. If I don't get a paper packet, I print out the agenda so I can record the ayes and the nays and who made the motions. And I feel like, along with Laura Lee, if I'm going to be the clerk and I'm the one who steps up to take her place when she's gone, I need a paper packet, because if you're running a meeting and seeing people, whatever, on your online, you need to have the paper packet to read off of.
No problem. I think they'll get you a paper packet. I see Jen shaking her head yes. I don't see any reason that she can't get you the paper packet. To me, the question then becomes, how do you get the paper packets to them? Because you're so spread out geographically, and that's something the staff just needs to get figured out. And you may have to send out a classified member to get paper packets out, because the board meeting is big business, and you need to be able to make sure that your board members are prepared. I think that's something that staff can take care of. I think what you need to do, Jen, is pull the board and figure out exactly who wants paper packets and who's fine with electronic packets, and then figure out a system to get them their paper packets by the Friday before a Tuesday meeting.
Yeah, Tricia, this last meeting, she had paper packets delivered to the school that the board member represents.
And so do you have a inter-district mail of some sort like that? Is there any reason that that person delivering the inter-district mail, when they do that once a month because of these board meetings, can take a waylay out to these trustees' residents and drop it on their front porch? I don't know how remote you all live from the schools, but.
There is inter-district mail, and it's not a problem for me to go to the district office and pick it up, because I live in Hoopaw. What I've been experiencing is this last meeting, not all of the items were on the paper agenda, in the paper packet, like our first interim, and that was a huge one. So, and I don't recall the board voting to switch to the online packets. I don't know, Carrie, unless you can remember.
No, I don't recall that either.
And so I think this is fairly easily solved, in that I would suggest, unless Jen, you tell me you can't do this, I would suggest you don't rely on the board member coming to the school to pick up the packets. To me, it's much better if you have a staff member drop it on their front porch. That way, if a board member's held up and they can't make it there before they close, or when we're in COVID right now and the office is locked up and they get down there and they can't get in because, I don't know, you had to shut down because you had a quarantine period or whatever, you know for sure that that was dropped on their front porch or in their wherever, dropped, and they have it and it's in their hands, and they'll be prepared for the meeting coming up on the following Tuesday. I think that's something that you could accommodate with your staff, isn't it? Uh-oh, Jen just froze.
I have a something to bring up, and that is that if Jen and the board chair set the agenda on Wednesday, that makes it difficult to get the board meeting all printed up before Friday. I mean, Friday is probably the earliest you could get it sent out.
You have to have it sent out by Friday, though, because that's the Brown Act deadline.
I know, but I'm just saying, you know, maybe they should have their meeting on Tuesday instead of Wednesday.
If I can, that's why there was the request to have the deadline 10 days prior to.
That makes sense.
However, I have heard from principals that the 10 days prior is hard. And aren't they, under this electronic thing, uploading stuff themselves?
Yes, they would be, but here would be my suggestion. And no offense, but that's not your problem. You tell Jen what you want and she'll make it happen. Because to me, that's down in the staff level of what she needs to work on. You need to tell her what it is that you want from her, and then she'll go make that happen. So if you want
Okay.
those to you by Friday, you need to provide her some latitude to make some some suggestions to you, working with Trish on when she needs to make her internal deadlines for the agenda items.
Okay.
I make a comment, just an example of, if things are being uploaded, I need, there was something I had to pull because there was something that was in a report that was, hadn't gone to closed session yet. So that I do need that time to be able to go. If the board wants direct reports from principals, I still need the time to go over them with, to review them or go over them with Laura Lee and Carrie.
So I'm going to ask a different question in a minute about direct reports from principals.
Yeah,
That's a different.
Okay.
So, but I will get there. So back to this conversation right here. So there's a proposed protocol on the table. I think we worked through some things. And just so we can get it down for the record, who wants, so Trish knows this right now, who wants a paper packet? And don't feel bad about wanting a paper packet. That's okay.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Are we doing thumbs up too?
Well, so far it looks like Rob. Do you want electronic or do you want paper?
I don't need a paper.
Okay, so you're good with electronic.
I can do electronic.
Okay, excellent. Debbie?
Yes, I
Yeah,
would like paper.
Debbie's paper. Okay. Kadusha? Both? Okay, so you'll
I'd like to have access to the electronic packet, but I do want a paper packet.
Okay, so it sounds like you're getting a paper packet to everyone with the exception, of Rob right now. So that direction's been provided. I think you will all start getting those now.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so now back to this protocol. The only question that we left off on that brought us down this conversation was, do you want the clerk at the agenda review or do you just want the president there?
I think the clerk could be in set instead of if the president can't be there.
Okay, so I will just leave it as president then for right now, and then that will be that change will be made as we move forward. Could I get a thumbs up for who wants to support this protocol as it stands right now? All right, Kadusha? She's frozen. We have our number, so I'm going to assume that she's okay with it because I know she'll speak up if she's not. Okay, the superintendent and board believe that the need for information and/or clarification on agenda items is best accomplished by the submission of written questions or requests for such ahead of meetings. This will allow for in-depth consideration of items without unduly lengthening the meeting time. So what this means is, for instance, first interim report. If you have a question regarding the first interim report, you would submit that question ahead of time to Jen. And the rationale behind doing that is that she can work with Carmi and make sure that she has the answer to your question. Because the worst thing that can happen is you have a question, you don't ask it ahead of time, you get to the meeting, staff can't answer the question, and without the answer to the question, you don't feel comfortable voting one way or another on an agenda item. And so what this says is that you ask those questions ahead of time. There's two ways you can do this. You can either do it written like this, or if you have an agenda review where you sit down with the superintendent, each of you, either in groups of 1, 2, or 3, because your 7-person board, you can do up to 3 people, where you can discuss the items on the agenda.
How soon would that be before the meeting that we need to, because Jen has been very good about calling, she's called me I don't know about everybody else, but she's been good about calling us at least the day before the meeting to make sure that we don't have any questions.
So it would have to happen sometime between the president's review of the agenda and the meeting.
Okay, well,
And likely it would have to happen on Monday or over the weekend, because you likely wouldn't have the agenda till Friday.
yes. That's how it's been happening.
So do you want these submissions, do you want it to put down that they're written questions? Or do you want it down that you're going to meet with her informally prior to the meeting? What's your preference?
Sometimes, Fred, it's just like a phone call. It's a quick clarification. Something is not clear, and sometimes it's just a quick question. And a telephone call for me has solved 99% of those.
Okay. So the thing that I would ask Jen to do if I was in that situation, if you had a quick clarifying call, there's probably 6 other board members that have the same clarifying question. And so what she would need to do then is, after she talked with you, is send out a quick email to everyone saying, the trustee asked me blah, 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 and here is the rationale behind blah, blah, blah. So that way everyone knows the same information.
Okay.
So do you want that? So how it is right now, it says submission of written questions. Do you want to add in there or a phone call, or do you all want to commit that you're going to meet with her via minimally phone prior to each meeting? What do you want to do?
Well, with the COVID, we can't meet all the time. So I think,
Meeting too, a virtual meeting. Like for instance, right now, I meet with every one of my board members virtually prior to the meeting.
that can happen. Oh, I just think that we need to have the call versus the written questions, because that sometimes that we have both options.
Perfect.
That works.
All that?
Yeah.
Okay, so can I get a thumbs up if you support this one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I think I got everyone there. All right. And what I'm doing right now, because of technology, I'm counting to 5 and moving on. Please, if I missed your thumbs down, please say something, because that is not intentional.
Fred, I've got a quick comment on a previous one. When we were setting the board meetings the second Tuesday of every month, this past meeting, we got caught because of the new, the change in the voting thing, that we have to meet the second Friday after the election. And that will come up on December of every other year. I don't know if we need to put that back in there or not.
I just lost my place here. Let me find where I was.
I'm sorry, but that just popped in my head.
That was good. Lori.
I don't think that matters. Like for instance, as long as you're public about it, we change a board meeting every year from a Thursday to a Tuesday because of the Powder Puff game in May. And then we change another meeting because of homecoming week. I think as long as it's on your calendar and it just says that normally it'll be on Tuesday, I think you're fine. I really do think you're fine.
It did catch one of our board members, though, with a medical procedure that had been planned around the original date.
But I assume you set your board calendar that you passed at your organizational meeting to reflect the cutoff for the organizational meeting in 2021?
No, we didn't originally set it that way because nobody knew, and I caught it when our lawyer posted an email that said that everybody needs to be aware that last year this was decided. And so I brought it to the attention of the superintendent, and nothing changed and nothing changed. And 2 weeks ahead of time, nothing had changed. And so I was like, okay, maybe they decided that it, wasn't needed to be changed. And then right after that, a week later, they changed it.
It
Because,
didn't affect 2021 because there's no election next year.
yeah,
That's true. So I think that, so we could let me find that dang protocol because I lost it. It's here. Here it is. How about I fix that by putting this?
perfect.
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah. And that it has to be after the 12th of December.
So that would move to the third Tuesday.
Right. So Jen will be well on top of that next time.
Okay.
All right. So here we go. The superintendent. Nope, that's the one we just did. Board meetings, board member should be board members. Board members will make every effort to submit prior to the meeting questions they intend to ask so that the superintendent and district staff has the opportunity to prepare. This is more of a repeat of what is up ahead, what was in the previous one.
Yeah.
So this was just a second option of doing that. I think the first one covers that, and we talked through that. Do you want this? It just reaffirms what we talked about a minute ago, in or out? I would suggest that we take it out and you go with what you have in the previous one.
I agree with that.
I do too.
Anyone on that?
That's fine. Fine.
So this next one wasn't addressed in the previous one though, and that is when an individual board member requests information, that information will be provided to all board members. And so Jen kind of needs that so she doesn't feel awkward when one person requests something and then she says, well, Rob had the question of why is the sky blue? And so I wanted to provide it for everyone. Is that what you want as a board? Is that when one board member has a question, not like, are we meeting at 5 o'clock or 5:30? Not that kind of question, but a question like, why is the band even on the agenda for this upcoming meeting? Something like that. Or how many music teachers do we have in the district? A question like that. Is that something that when one board member asks a question that you would like her to give the answer to all board members? I suggest yes. And the reason I suggest yes is because it's very important that all board members are on the same playing field when you get to a regular meeting as far as what information you have to make your decision.
I agree with that because we can't contact each other and discuss items ahead of time. So this would, if one person has a question, more than likely another one does. And so this would not violate the Brown Act.
Correct. And then the second part of that is if you get into a meeting and you ask a question because you didn't think of it prior to the meeting and you didn't have an opportunity to ask Jen the question so she could answer it, that you acknowledge that it's a spontaneous question. And the rationale behind that is sometimes staff looks less than intelligent when a board member asks a question and they have to say, I have no idea. But if you say, I just thought of this, I probably should have asked it ahead of time so you're prepared to answer it. So I recognize you may not be prepared to answer it, but why is the sky blue? Or whatever your question would be.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can I get a thumbs up if you're in support of this protocol. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, very good. Any requests of staff that will take longer than 30 minutes to fulfill must be made by the majority of the board so as to not detract staff from focused efforts that are meant to move the district toward achieving the year's goals. Let me give you an example of this. I had a board member one time get elected to the board, and this particular board member had a very personal agenda, and he kept asking me time and time again for the same item. We would provide it, then he'd ask for it again. Then he would ask for us to put together a bunch of information for him, and it started detracting from our staff time. And time is money. And so this was added to our protocols as the district so the board could guard the time of staff. Because it's going to be very hard for Jen, without a protocol like this, to tell a board member, no, I'm not going to do that.
It makes sense
This
to me.
is from individual board members.
That is correct.
I think we need to put individual in there somewhere.
Okay.
So thumbs up if you can support this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Question? Yep. Is that a question or a yes or a thumbs up? Thumbs up. Okay. All right.
Fred, are we getting the other people's votes? Because it seems like we're always being 5.
I can't see some of them voting.
So Kadusha keeps getting kicked off. She had texted me and she's going back to her office to utilize the internet there.
Okay.
And how about Rob?
Rob has been voting.
Yep. I stop counting at 5, even if I see 6 or 7.
Okay.
And that's why I was asking, if you hear me stop counting at 5 and you have a question and you feel like it wasn't addressed, stop me. So, okay, I'm going to skip a couple slides there. I'm not going to do the video just to keep us moving forward. Individual board members are expected to self-monitor compliance to public meeting laws, including limiting closed session to the legally appropriate agenda items. So what that means is you need to police yourself inside closed session. If you're in a closed session meeting and it comes up, why are you closing the music program at the high school? I keep picking on the music program, sorry. You have to police yourself and say, this is not a closed session item. We need to talk about this in open session. And that just becomes a responsibility of everybody to be conscious of that and make sure you don't violate the Brown Act with closed session. If you're in support of that, please give me a thumbs up. I think it's a pretty self-explanatory one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're there. All right. Top 10 Brown Act mistakes. Number 10, reaching consensus outside of board meetings. I think we've talked about that several times. You can't reach a consensus outside of a board meeting because 4 of you cannot talk outside of a board meeting. Use of email to debate rather than an update. So in other words, an update comes from Jen. She can email you. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that Jen can pull the board and ask you how you're going to vote? Is that a Brown Act violation? And know exactly how each one of you are going to vote?
No, we don't.
Brown Act violation. Your superintendent can know ahead of time exactly how each of you are going to vote, as long as she doesn't tell any of the other board members. She needs to use that very sparingly. That's not something that I'd recommend her doing often. But there are times that she may need to know that. And let me give you an example. Let's say you're hiring a new assistant superintendent and she wants to offer the new assistant superintendent the job. And she wants to make sure she has the support of the board before offering the job. and there's not a board meeting coming up for a couple of weeks, she could pull the board and say, this is going to be on the agenda at the upcoming meeting. Do you have any problems with me hiring such and such to be the new assistant superintendent? And so she could pull the board in that way, and that's not a Brown Act violation.
Would we have seen the information about the person before that?
My assumption is if she called and asked you that question, she would say, all right, I want to hire Fred Van Vleck as our assistant superintendent. Here's the process we went through. Here's the things that he's going to bring to the district. Do you have any issues with this? And then at that point, you would say, I don't know enough. Can you tell me more? And she would get you that information in order for you to be able to make an informed decision. Okay, so she can send out those updates. However, one of the scariest things as a superintendent is a board member hitting reply to all. That's a bad thing. Yes.
At my last district, I send out BCC so that they can't reply to all. So if they hit reply, they because that had happened where it became a serial. So that was the one way to shut it down. But I think you could give another suggestion.
Here's where me and my business partner disagree. He, in these meetings, advocates that he thinks that you should not be using BCC. I still use BCC. His rationale for not using BCC is, and this is based on an attorney's advice, is that it sounds like it's being secretive when you include the board on an email that's going out to everyone. And so in order to be upfront and make sure that the board, everyone knows that the board is included on an email, they should be included as a CC as opposed to a BCC. That's a stylistic point of view. I still BCC. If you want to CC and the board understands that they can't BCC, that's fine. But if, as a board member, let's say you send an email out to the whole district and the board is not BCC'd and they reply to all, still not a Brown Act violation. It's only a Brown Act violation if the board starts engaging in that conversation. Even if one board member chimes back in and hits reply to all, that's a Brown Act violation. So that's where you definitely need to be careful. So, any other questions on email and going through that process? All right. Jen.
I just have a question on email. I think it's been resolved, but using district email versus personal email, or is that going to be a later, that's not, I guess that's not Brown Act necessarily, but.
That's public records request information. And so that's something important to know as a trustee. Personally, I have separate email accounts. I have a district email account, I have a personal email account, and I have a consulting national center email account. I keep all of those separate very intentionally. I'd encourage you as a board member to do the same. I'd encourage you to use only the district provided email address. The rationale behind that is if you get a Public Records Request Act and you mix personal email and business email, you have to go through and spend all the time redacting all the information that's personal. And there is a question of how much of your personal email can be discoverable by the Public Records Request Act. However, if you keep those very separate and you keep your work email or board member email separate from your personal email, you avoid that whole problem altogether. Also have to be careful with text messages. Those are discoverable as well. Have to be super careful now that Zoom is up. My suggestion is that in your Zoom meetings that you disable chat just in order to avoid any feeling that there may be communication between board members, especially in the private conversations. Public is very sensitive to that, and so something to consider and think about. All right, number 8, taking action on a non-agendized. A great example of that is when the superintendent's report is up, and the superintendent brings up an issue, and you want to take action on that issue that the superintendent brought up, but it's not on the agenda. You can't do that. It has to be agendized. And so my recommendation, if it's an emergency issue, schedule a special meeting for the next day and take action on that item if it's that important. There's no reason you just need 24 hours notice. you can schedule a special meeting with 24 hours notice. So it's that important to schedule the meeting for the next day. And the reason for that is to protect the public and allow them to have the input, because the public may not realize that the music program is going to be discussed. And they be watching every single agenda because they're very passionate about the music program. And it wasn't on the agenda, and then you took action. They didn't have the ability to be there because they didn't know about it. That's the rationale behind that. Not allowing public comment. We've already talked about that one, so I won't spend much more time on it. You can choose, though. Let me ask you a question. Can you have public comment just at the beginning of your meeting and no place else in your meeting? So for the whole agenda, you've got an agenda that has 25 items in it. You have a public comment period at the beginning of your agenda. Can you have your entire public comment at the beginning of the meeting and no further public comment anywhere else in your meeting? Is that legal by the Brown Act? What do you think? Yes, it is. Many districts do it that way. Many districts don't want, many districts take it to the extreme as far as public comment, as far as how much engagement they want back and forth to the public and how much they want to draw the separation between a meeting held in the public and a town hall meeting. And so they go to the extreme of having all of their public comments, even on agenda items at the very beginning of the meeting, and then they never have any more public comment throughout the rest of the meeting. So you could do that if you want. I'm not suggesting that, but that is legal to do.
We did that in the past.
And also, okay, also special meetings like this one, you only have to have public comment on the agenda item. You don't have to have public comment on anything. And so if someone was going to public comment today, it had to be on this agenda item. All right, not setting a time limit on time to speak for public comment. We already talked about that. It's in your bylaws. Cutting off negative comments about staff. I saw in what Trish emailed out that you already have that well addressed in your board agenda. You're already on top of that, so that's good. Staff present for student expulsions. Oh my gosh, excuse me, student expulsions. So what that means is you are in your judicial role when you expel a student. In this district, does the board expel students, or do you have an administrative hearing panel?
The board.
The board. So one of the things I would suggest is that you don't do that any longer. I would suggest that you get an administrative hearing panel who makes a recommendation to the board on whether or not you expel a student, and then the board makes the final decision. You can talk with Jen about that in the future, but you're a big enough district that, in my opinion, as a board, you shouldn't be hearing those. You should only be upholding or denying the recommendation of an administrative panel. So now that being said, when you deliberate, even on the recommendation of an administrative panel, Jen or your other staff cannot be inside the boardroom when you deliberate. The reason for that is because Jen represents the district. When you make a decision on whether or not a student should be expelled, you are no longer representing the district. You are an independent judicial board making a decision on whether or not a student should be expelled. You don't represent the district, and you don't represent the student at that point. Jen or her staff member represents the district. The parent or their advocate represents a student, and then you make a decision. And so there's a perceived bias if Jen is in with the board because the parent would have to be allowed in there as well during your deliberation if she was allowed inside during the Okay. Number 3, talking about everything else under consideration by the board during a closed session. We addressed that in one of your protocols. So that one's easy. Refusing to cure. And we're not talking about a slab of bacon. We're talking about when you do a Brown Act violation and someone calls you on it, it's very simple to cure. What that means is you just go back and have it reheard at another meeting. So for instance, let's say you made the mistake and you took action on an item that wasn't properly agendized. Re-agendize it and go back and retake action on it. That is curing. And so if you're going to be stubborn and say, we're not going to go back and cure this, or we're not going to go back and fix this, that's what that means, refusing to cure. And then number one is not developing your board protocols where you hold each other accountable to those things in the Brown Act. All right. How are you all doing? A lot of information. We have a few more items on the board meeting. Where are we at and what do you want to do? We're 6 hours in. You want to keep going or you want to pause? I'm not hearing anybody who wants to pause.
How much time do you estimate to get through all of this?
We're getting quicker. So I think we could probably get through it in about an hour, depending on how many questions you all have and how much you want to change around.
Awesome.
I prefer to go on since I'm here. I've set aside the day anyway.
Okay, well, let's keep going. I'm going to skip most of the videos that I have in there. I have lots of videos. I'm going to skip those in favor of moving through in time, unless you tell me you want to watch the videos.
No, let's go.
Okay. All right. So public participation. Since the public meeting law, which is the Brown Act, expressly prohibits discussion leading to action from being conducted unless it's agendized, governance team members are strongly encouraged to refrain from engaging members of the public in dialogue about issues not on the agenda. That's during public comment, is exactly what that's talking about. So if someone brings up, why are you closing down the music program, and you do not have the music program agendized, you shouldn't be talking about that there. Because of that very reason I talked about earlier, why you can't make a decision in that meeting. It's not properly agendized, and you may have a constituent who is very attached to the music program and would be there immediately if they knew you were going to discuss it. So this is basically the law. So thumbs up, can you live with that one?
Yes.
All right, we got our 5, I mean, well, there's more than 5 there, but in general, citizens and residents wishing to dialogue with members should be encouraged to contact individual members and discuss issues of importance with them or the superintendent as appropriate. So in other words, if someone gets up and starts asking you a bunch of questions during public comment, you would say, our protocols encourage you to contact the superintendent or to contact individual board members, since this isn't agendized, so we don't enter into a back and forth. So it just provides you the background to answer that way. Basically law, thumbs up if you can live with this one or support it. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, we're there. As a result of comment under public communication, a member may ask the superintendent to briefly comment for clarity or correction. The member may also ask that a matter be investigated with or without the follow-up report to the board. This is one of my favorite protocols. And so what I ask my board to do when we have someone come in for public comment that is out of the clear blue sky, I always ask my president to ask this. I ask my president to ask, have you talked to a staff member about this? And if it's out of the clear blue sky, I'm generally going to say no. And if they have talked to me and I know that a public member is coming, my board's going to know about it anyways, because that's my job as a superintendent. And if they say no, I would expect my board president to turn to me and say, Dr. Van Vleck, can you please set a time to meet with this person and discuss with them their concern? And I'll either say, yes, I will, or I'll say, well, the appropriate person to do that is our Director of Student Services. He's sitting right over here. You know, Mr. Leonard, can you please give your contact information to this person? And so what that does for you as a board is it makes you responsive to the concerns that parents are coming up with or constituents are coming up with, rather than just sitting there and looking like you don't care. And we want to be, as a staff, responsive to that anyways. And it provides that contact, and it also teaches the parent that coming to this meeting, we're going to direct you back to staff anyways. And so it shows them how to come in and get us to respond to them. That's the idea behind that. So how do you feel about that? Can you support that one being in there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we got our 5. If a governance team member feels compelled to speak to the issue, the member must first be recognized by the board president. So this is a question of how you want to handle your public comment. So what this means is, if you have a public member getting up and saying, why are you closing the music program? As a trustee, for instance, Rob, let's say, Rob, you really want to speak to this. You would say, President George, can I speak to this item, please? As opposed to speaking directly to the public comment person. This is a stylistic point on your side as a board. How do you want to do this? Is that what you want to do, or do you want to just allow each of you individually without recognition from the president to address the public comment?
I like how this is stated.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, me too.
In trying to facilitate the meeting and not let it get out of hand, I would like it where they ask the president to respond.
All right, I think we've got our support. Can I just get a thumbs up as far as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yep, okay. All right, the governance team will strive for brevity in deliberations, keeping remarks brief and to the point so that all opinions can be expressed and meetings can be efficient. Addressing each agenda item, the board shall normally adhere to the following process. Here's where it changes from board to board. Do you like to do staff presentation, input from the community, board deliberation, or do you like to do input from the community, staff presentation, board deliberation? What order do you like to have it? What is it currently?
I think the staff presentation may address a lot of the questions that the community may have. I don't know. But that's my thinking at the moment.
So I'll tell you my perspective on this. As a superintendent, I like it this way. As a board member, I would like it as the input from the community comes after the staff presentation.
That's what I'm thinking.
And candidly, my board has and it's not that big of a deal, but my board has the input from the community after the staff presentation for exactly what Laura Lee just brought up. Because half the time you're going to answer the questions that they may have. The staff may be able to diffuse some of the public comments that are out there. But as a staff member, it's not very fun when you get up and give a controversial presentation and then you have public comment afterwards and they just pick you apart. So that's the only thing I'd say about a staff member. So what you are saying is that you would like to have it this way.
I can live with that.
Correct? So like this. Is that how you all feel? You'd like it in that direction? So a thumbs up if you want that way. I see 1, 2.
Can you restate that?
3. I'm sorry.
I don't understand. Can you restate that? Are we putting our staff out there to be criticized if we do it this way?
Sort of.
Is that what you're saying? Or?
There's really pros and cons to either one. And so I'll restate it what I said one more time. And that was, as a staff member, I would prefer to have my staff present after the input from the community for 2 reasons. Number one, they can address concerns that the community brought up. Number 2, they're not going to get crucified by the community for what they presented because they're presenting after the public comment. The disadvantage to that is if the staff goes first, many times they'll address the questions that the community is going to have, so there'll be less public comment. And then number two, the community will modify their comments based on what the staff report was. And you may get more community comment also because they may bring up another issue that the community wants to comment on. You know what, as staff, this sounds horrible, but that's our job and we're going to do it. And so it's really a preferential of where you're at as a board on how you want to be. This isn't a sword I would die on with my board. I would say my preference is to do it the other way, but I fully get as a board why you wouldn't want it that way. So that's fine with me. That answer your question?
Yeah, I like this.
Okay. So staff members, when presenting items, this is the blue, to the board, are to provide appropriate backup materials for the board to review prior to the board meeting. This is what you were talking about earlier. If it is necessary to provide a presentation to the board, presentations are limited to not more than 10 minutes unless prior approval from the president is received. And so here's the fundamental question on this one. Do you think your staff, number one, do you think your staff, well, let me back up even further. Number one, do you think it's reasonable right now for your board meetings to go from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.? Or do you think that that is too long?
It's kind of long.
They're actually 5 to 10.
5 to 10, okay, including closed session. So is it reasonable? How productive are you as we sit here in our 7th hour of a board development session? How productive are you as a board member at 9:30 at night deliberating the music program after sitting in that chair for 4.5 hours?
And after whatever your day entailed.
Right, right.
It's been difficult for the board members, but when we were doing construction and we had a mass amount of items to cover, we had to, I mean, it was imperative. We were even having special board meetings and it wasn't enough time. So now that we're not doing the construction so much, we might be able to get done by, bring the time up to 9:30 anyway.
Debbie?
Yes, and I was just going to say a lot of us, we're kind of used to those long hours. I know, from where I live, I'm always on late hours, but one night of the month is not bad. We can do that. I think.
So do you not want to strategize in on how you can, because again, there's a stylistic point. Do you want to strategize on how you can minimize the length of your board meeting? It's not always going to happen. Or are you happy with how it is right now? If you're happy with how it is right now, I suggest you take this out. If you want to strategize on how to reduce the length of your board meeting, I suggest you leave this in.
I think we could leave it in. I'm noticing that after we haven't had all the construction items on the agenda, we have been getting done by 9 or there. I remember before, sometimes we were hitting the 10 o'clock hour and we were having to make motions to go longer. And we have gone up to midnight, which, yeah, we're wiped out, but it was stuff that had to be done, and it was just either that or have more meetings. So I'm for leaving this in.
So, Rob, did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I was just saying that this looks fine to me because in the past we have actually spent quite a lot of time on individual items that they kind of drug on. So this is very nice, actually.
So I think this is going to, Jen, provide you, if they're supportive of this, is going to provide you with some rationale when you go out and talk to your staff about this is how long it's going to be, period. If you want to include more information in the agenda item, feel free. However, your presentation is 10 minutes, period. So let me ask the question of the board. Do you support what's in blue right there? Thumbs up if you want to keep that in the protocols.
You know,
One.
what if the audit report happens? That's usually longer than 10 minutes.
Then if Jen believes that the audit report needs to be longer, then she will reach out to Laura Lee and say, hey, the audit report's going to be tonight, and I'm requesting of you that we allot 20 minutes for it, or whatever the number is that you think is appropriate. So the president can always say, we'll allot more time to it. And that'll be handled before the board meeting, though, not at the board meeting. And that would, where that would happen is during agenda review.
Well, the audit report is not exactly staff.
However, the auditors work for us, and trust me, we talk to them before they come to our board, and if we tell them to keep it 10 minutes, they'll keep it 10 minutes. It depends on where you're at as a board as well. You may have, you have some fiscal issues in your district right now. I'm well aware of that. Jen and I have talked a lot about that. So you may want some more time for your auditor, though. And so I think that's something that you need to say. And remember, just because it's 10 minutes for the report, that doesn't include your questions. That just is them standing and delivering. You get as much time as you want as a board member to ask whatever question you want to ask. That's your prerogative. It's your board meeting.
I have a question. In the last board packet we had a long list of commercial warrants, and I didn't have background to know, is that an informational list for us to know what payments have already been made, or are we being asked to provide some sort of approval, or what, is that just informational?
Sue, you are fortuitous. We have a board protocol coming up on warrants.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Right.
That's a nice segue. So I promise you we'll get to that one. So on the 10-minute piece, could I get a thumbs up for those people that want to support this and think we should go in this direction? 1, 2, 3. All right, we've got them. Very good. All right, I'm going to skip a couple videos here. Board members individually and collectively demonstrate confidentiality as appropriate and as outlined through the mandates of the California Education Code, Brown Act, and other compliance criteria established by law or legislation. Respecting the confidentiality of information maintains the board's judicial review role. So in other words, this just says that you're not going to violate the conversations you have in closed session. It just means that you're not going to go out and investigate when you hear somebody didn't do something right in closed session like Andy did, and just following the Brown Act. Just means you're going to self-monitor individually. Can you all live with that? Thumbs up if you can live with it. 1, 2, 3. Yep, all right. The use of email and social communication is subject to the public meeting law. We talked about that already, and also the public request. The superintendent shall forward questions and answers to all board members. Board members, when responding, may not reply to all. We already talked about that. I think you all agreed to it. This is just reiterating it. Can you support this one? Thumbs up if you can. It's pretty much the law. So, all right, we're there. Moving on. The board wishes to maintain a culture of professionalism, stay focused, and respect the need of the trustees to be available to their families. This is all about the phone during a board meeting. Electronic devices will be set for silent or vibrate. Trustees will be discreet in checking electronic devices. The other option is you can make an agreement as a board that no electronic devices are allowed at the dais. I've seen it both ways. It's really up to you on what you want to do with this one.
I like this one, silent or vibrate, because There could be an emergency that comes up and, people need to have that available.
Okay. The thing you need to be really cognizant about is that you're not texting.
We haven't had a problem.
Okay. All right, so just be cognizant about not texting during a meeting. I know there's a court case where a couple board members got themselves in trouble because they were texting back and forth about how much they disliked a third board member. That came out in a public records request, and it was very embarrassing for them. So just be careful with that one. All right, so thumbs up if you can support this one. 1, 2, 3. Yep, we got it. Okay, we're zipping along now. I didn't forget. There we go. Okay, the board believes that no reason. Let me make it a little bigger so you can see. The board believes that when no legal reason exists of a conflict of interest, its members have a duty to vote on the issues before them. There is no law that says you cannot abstain. That's the point of this. When a member abstains, his or her abstention shall not be counted for purposes of determining whether a majority of the membership of the board has taken action. So in other words, if two of your, this is the law, you're a 7-person board, if 2 members abstain, you only need 3 to make it pass because those members don't count towards the vote. So the question is, how do you want to, has it been a problem in your district? Is this just something that hasn't been a problem as far as abstentions go? This is just saying if you abstain, you need to tell why you abstained. Oh, I'm sorry. That's an option.
It's not been a problem.
This says you can't abstain unless there's a legal reason to abstain. That's going to be your, because it's just a protocol, but the law says you can abstain for any reason you want. But by agreeing to this protocol, you would be saying you don't believe people should be abstaining.
So what this says is you can only abstain if you have a conflict of interest. Otherwise, you're supposed to vote.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for instance, a board member right now on the music program could look out at the constituents and say, oh my gosh, if I were to vote on this, I would vote against the popular vote of everybody that's out there. So I'm just going to abstain. And they have every right to do that by the law. But what you're in, even with this protocol, they still could do it. But what you're doing as a board is if you agree to this, is that you're all agreeing if no matter how tough the vote is, you're not going to abstain unless by law you have to. An example is a conflict of interest. Let's say you're you're doing a contract with the Forest Service. Kadusha, you work for the Forest Service, is that right? Or you're on mute.
Sorry. No, I work
Oh, and you froze.
with the tribe, but I do have projects with the First Service.
Okay, so here's a great one. Let's say since you work with the tribe, let's say you're, I'm not sure which tribe, I think you said it earlier, but I'm not sure which tribe you're working with, but let's say it's a Yurok tribe. I'm not sure. You're voting into a contract with the Yurok tribe that directly impacts your position that you work with them for. You would likely need to abstain from that vote. In fact, you would likely need to leave the room and not even be a part of the conversation for that. If you get into that situation, you can work with Jen and work through that. If you have a legal reason you need to abstain, that's a reason to abstain. So can you support this the way it is right now, just saying that you're not going to abstain unless there's a legal reason to?
I have a question about that, because if maybe you're abstaining because you feel like ethically it's just, not something that you should participate in, but it's not necessarily part of policy, you're being forced to participate when you don't believe that you should. I mean, isn't that why we have the choice to abstain?
Legally, you can do it. That is absolutely right. But I will, and the reason this is in here is because it will drive a board apart. If you go back to the Jim Collins quote in the beginning about teamwork, and team is what's going to drive results. If you get in the middle of a really tough board meeting, it's a really politically tough decision, and it's a really close vote, and you abstain because you don't want to tick off your constituents, that's what this is designed for. Now, if you're abstaining because you have a moral issue with it, I don't think this is really designed for that. This is really designed for you not doing a chicken out abstention, if that makes sense.
Like a political abstention.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think, I'm speaking for myself now, the other trustees would need to chime into this. I don't think anybody's going to have an issue if you have a moral reason why you're doing an abstention with your personal morals. That's very personal. So
Or
where do
just
you
not
have-
enough information. At last week's meeting, Trustee Waddy was nominated for a board clerk position. She was not at the meeting, and that was the first meeting I did attend, and I didn't know what the position entailed. And in the absence of Trustee Waddy, I didn't have a way of knowing if she wanted that position. So I abstained. I said, I don't know what the position entails or whether Trustee Waddy would want the position. So I abstained.
And I probably would have advised you as a superintendent to do like a conditional vote, assuming that she wants it, and this is something she wants to do, I vote yes.
Well,
But-
thank you,
yeah.
Sue. And I was good with it. I'm just fine with it. But yes, that was an important consideration.
Well, I just think if you see in the minutes that I abstained on that vote, you should know why.
And I remember, when I first started on the board, there was some issues that I just didn't know enough about them because I was so new that I abstained from voting because I didn't feel like I had enough information being such a new board member. So I think there's a lot of reasons that you would abstain from a vote.
A lot of these protocols I've wanted to abstain because I don't feel like I have enough experience to be shaping the way that we're interacting, so.
When I got on the board, I felt the same, my first years, I felt the same way, but they explained to me at that time that you can only abstain if an immediate family member is involved, or if you are involved monetarily with this subject. Otherwise, you can't legally abstain.
Somebody gave you bad advice. So here's my suggested edit.
Pardon me?
Suggested edit in the spirit of moving along. If a board member abstains, they will explain the rationale for doing so. So in other words, you still have the statement here that the board believes when no legal reason exists from a conflict of interest, that members have the duty to vote on the issues before them. Basically, however, if a member abstains, they will explain the rationale for doing so. And so I think that covers what you've been talking about. Can I get 5 support on this one?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Okay. We're going to move on. And let me ask you a question. I'm going to start pushing really hard. You're going to see my D come out to get us through this. I don't want to do that without your permission though, because if you want to get through this, I'm going to start pushing us through pretty quickly. I suggest, if you don't want me to do that, that we stop and schedule another meeting. But I don't want to offend you by pushing you through it. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you want me to push? I'm not going to be rude. I'm not going to walk all over you, but I'm going to push with your permission.
How much more time do you think it would take?
I still think we can get done before 4 easily.
Before 4?
Oh, yeah. Let me put,
Okay, how about let me poll the rest of the board members here. Would you poll them and see if they're all want to do that or whether we want to come back?
Would you like me to do a Zoom poll?
Did you say, Laura Lee? Did you say that we could come back at some point and change these if we needed to?
you can come back and change these anytime you want to change.
Let's just,
I don't suggest you change them without a facilitator, though. You can't put Jen in the position of facilitating you as a board because she can't make statements like, I'm going to push you hard.
want to go home, no. No.
So, Trish, are you polling the board?
I can put a poll out right now. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to do a Zoom poll. Let me create the Zoom poll real quick.
Or how about we just do a thumbs up? A thumbs up, we want to push for a while. A thumbs down, you want to recess and regroup and do this in the future. So thumbs up, keep going. Thumbs down, you want to stop at this point. I see 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 3, 4. We have all thumbs up, 1 thumb sideways, and 1 thumbs down. So you tell me, Laura Lee, with that vote, what we're doing. I suggest you let me push for a half an hour and we do the same check.
You're on mute.
Yeah, let's try for a half hour. I'm having a difficulty here with my broken leg, so I can stand it another half hour.
Okay, I'm going to push hard for another half hour. Here we go. Abstentions are appropriate in cases where there's a personal relationship. We already talked about this. This is more about abstentions. And so I'm suggesting, based on what we already did, that we get rid of this one because we already solved our abstention one. I'll give you a second to look at it.
Okay.
If there's something you want to include in the one above, let me know. I got 1, 2 thumbs up as far as just getting rid of this one and leaving the one above. I'm going to delete this to make sure that I don't.
You're getting rid of it?
Okay, do you want to keep it? So we had abstentions up here much more briefly. This is a higher, if you want to leave this.
Oh, I want to leave it.
I want to leave it. It's,
Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's there. And I saw, I'm sorry, I'm pushing too hard. Let me see thumbs for leaving it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we got them. All right, board meetings will model professional behavior by being polite and respectful of the points of view held by their fellow governance team members. The governance team will address one another by their last name or first name. What is the practice in your district?
First name.
First name.
Okay.
First name is fine.
Can you support this? Thumbs up. All right, we got it. Each board member respects the right of other board members to vote in the minority position. If so doing, each board member agrees as a courtesy to the team to explain the reason for their minority vote, either during deliberation or after casting the vote. So in other words, if you vote no and you're only one person who votes no, you won't just vote no and never explain why you voted no. Thumbs up, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Governance team members are reminded that policy and decisions reserved to the board must be made as a board, except where otherwise indicated in the educational or government codes. A majority consists of 4 of 7 members of the board voting for an item. Once the decision has been made, it becomes the decision of the board. Under the concept of majority rule, each member is compelled to support the successful implementation of board policy decision, program, or procedure, even when he or she does not agree with the decision. If a member of the governance team cannot support the decision of the board because it offends a moral or personal code, the member is expected at a minimum to refrain from undermining the decision or directive. So we talked about this early in the meeting today. This is really solidified in a protocol. How do you all feel about this one? 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 thumbs up. 6. Okay, we're moving on.
Does our president vote all the time or only in a tie?
My suggestion is the president votes all the time.
All the
You
time.
have just as much of a voice as everybody else. That'd be a stylistic point, but I would highly suggest that the president votes all the time. Do you always do a roll call vote?
Yeah.
Really,
Do you
yes.
always do a roll call vote in the same order?
Not in the same order always. Sometimes we start from one end and sometimes we start from the other.
Because if I was a smart, conniving board member, I would always want to vote last. And so it's something to think about, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the reason being is I don't want to tick off my constituents. And so if we have a packed board meeting and everybody wants you to keep the music program, and I'm the last voting member, and I really know we have to cancel the music program, I would wait till you all voted, and then I would say, no, I believe we need to keep the music program, so I vote no. And put the rest of you in an awkward spot. And so it's something to think about. I would always encourage you to have a rotating, so in other words, Laura Lee votes first this time, the next time Debbie votes first, the next time Sue votes first, right on down the line. So that way, and each time it changes. So it's just by randomness as far as who's going to vote last on that highly controversial issue that comes up. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. Parliamentary procedures are to be utilized as a guide to ensure for the most effective and efficient board meeting possible. Accordingly, the board uses Rosenberg's parliamentary procedure as its guide to managing the agenda of each board meeting. So you have a handout about Rosenberg's parliamentary procedure. There's a cheat sheet there. Some boards use Robert's Rules of Order. I'm guessing that you do not use Robert's Rules of Order because it's very complex and very hard to remember. I suggest you use Rosenberg's parliamentary procedure. It's very simplistic way to do parliamentary procedure, and I doubt that it's very different from what you are already doing. I'm assuming that you don't get a lot into tabling discussions or calling the previous question or many of those things. You can get into some real oddball areas of parliamentary procedure. Rosenberg just provides a pretty loose guideline as opposed to a very structured element like Robert's Rules of Order.
So we have a handout for Rosenberg's parliamentary
It
procedures.
came with the stuff that I sent out.
I don't see
On
it.
the bottom, it's at the end of the,
There should be a chart there.
Yeah, it follows page 40 of this slide presentation.
Okay,
It was the next attachment.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do we also need to go change a board policy? I haven't looked at the board policies, the 9,000s, to see if we say Roberts or whether we say this one. So that's just a note to check up on.
So we'll have Jen check up on that. I doubt that your board bylaws say that. They may, it's possible, but I doubt it. So can you support this one? All right, 1, 2, 3. I see 3 right now. 4, 5. Okay, we're going to keep going. Upon the request of an individual board member, a roll call vote will be provided, but you always do roll call votes every time?
Yes,
Is that a tradition that you want to continue?
I like it.
I like it.
Okay. The protocol for recording the votes of the individual board members shall follow the rotation established by the board, with the first vote being recorded of that of the past president, and the last vote would be that of the current president of the board. So that's where the rotation would start. And then Trish would keep track of that, and you'd rotate one member each time as far as who is the first vote. Is that something that you want to do?
The past president isn't even on our board anymore.
So in this case, then it would go to candidly, it really doesn't matter. I would suggest that you just put in whoever replaced the past president as far as being elected. And then once you have that order established, it just rotates through it each time and it drops down one. So that way it's never the same order. But if you don't see this as a problem and you don't want to do it, you don't have to.
Okay, so
Do
Can
we
we stop
normally do it in alphabetical, or how do we normally do it?
we just do it from one end or the other. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. We haven't established this procedure, and pretty much it would say the protocol for recording the votes of the individual board members shall follow the rotation established by the board, period.
Sure, but is there general support for this? I guess that'd be my first question, and then we'll go into wordsmith it. Do you want a rotation, or do you want to just do it as you've been doing it? A thumbs up for rotation. 1, 2, 3.
I think a rotation would be good.
Okay, so
But I agree with Trustee Waddy that, yeah, it could stop right there.
okay, got it. So a thumbs up for that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we got it. Whenever board members are appointed or elected to serve on the board, the superintendent shall administer the oath of office at the meeting. Who administers your oath of office right now? This is another stylistic thing. Superintendent does. Is that how you want it? In my district, my administrative assistant does it. Some districts, the board president does it. All right, so superintendent, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got it. Okay. Board meetings in the agenda. So this is policy revisions. Do you have a practice that you're already doing for your board policy revisions? So in other words, if you want to update a board policy, do you have a practice in place for that?
We do.
What is your practice?
We get the board policy that was the previous board policy, and then we get the board policy that is suggested by CSBA, and it's highlighted that what the changes are.
And do you hear that and approve it all in one meeting? Or does it come to a meeting
We have
for,
two readings.
okay. And then after your first reading, does it come back on the consent calendar or does it come back on the regular?
It comes back on the consent calendar.
Okay. So do you, Trish is saying no?
No?
No, the policies, this last meeting was the first time we've had board policies on the consent agenda. And that was the first reading. We've never had them on the consent agenda that I can recall before that. It's always been individual. When they come back for the second, they've always been individual.
So
Okay.
historically, what I've done is I've put the first reading on the consent agenda. And then when they come
That
back
was
for,
this-
yeah,
This past meeting was the first time I've seen that.
So the first reading, so let me ask a question. Why would it be on the consent calendar for a first reading? Because you're taking action on those if it's on the consent calendar. It should be,
that's how I was directed by a previous superintendent.
okay. So that's actually a problem because you just approved on the first reading all of your policies if it's on the consent calendar. And so technically it doesn't need to come back. And so where that needs to go is under discussion. And now if you don't have any discussion, You just don't discuss it. You just say any questions on the board policies and you move on. Do you understand what I'm saying? As soon as you put, because you make a motion to approve in one sweep everything that's on the consent calendar. So let me walk you through a process and let's see if this works for you. So the district receives policy update packet from CSBA. The administrative assistant prints policies for the superintendent review and comments, and then Jen will do whatever it is that she can, whether she reaches out to other staff and so forth for that. Superintendent reviews updated recommendation policy changes and provides to the board in the first meeting. Is this in handwritten form when you do this? Is it in type form? How do you provide that to the board for that first reading?
What has come to us are the copies that we've gotten from CSBA.
Okay.
And they sometimes have a summary sheet.
But do you ever change what CSBA is recommending?
Yes.
There are occasions.
How are you providing Jen or Trish those recommended changes from the CSBA recommendation to the board? Are you just handwriting?
In the first reading, sometimes it's discussed in open session at the board. Sometimes when it comes back for the second reading and approval, any board member can suggest changes at that point.
Hold one second. That's after it already makes it to the board, though. I'm trying to figure out the changes once you get the CSBA recommendation and you're going to recommend a change that goes to the board on the policy. Do you type that in? Do you handwrite that in? Do you always just put forth what CSBA recommends? How do you get that to the board? I'm assuming you don't know what CSBA
It's discussed at the board meeting and
so wait, we're still at the staff level. We're not at the board level yet.
We've always skipped that part.
Staff should be bringing a recommended change to the board. The board should not, other than debating whether or not a policy should be updated, they shouldn't be a part of the what comes to the board process at all, or that review process. That should be done at a staff level with a recommendation made to the board.
Okay, the staff level being the superintendent and whoever else needs to be involved. Yeah, I think it's been working that way. It's come from them to us. And then that's why it's typed up afterwards and we read it at the first board meeting.
So I'm going to make a recommendation at this point. And for the sake of time, we've got some work to do in this one. I'm going to work with Jen on this. And then I'm going to have her bring it to you as a separate board item, as a proposal, and then it will become a part of your protocols at that point. Because I think it's going to take us more work to get through this in this meeting right now than you all want to spend on it. And so I suggest we pull these off as far as the protocols right now. It comes back to you as a separate item, as a board item on how you want to address protocols moving into the future. And then we will add that to the protocol handbook once you address this as a board. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to put a note on here to make sure I don't forget this. Okay, and so that's going to take us through this one as well. All right, when interacting with the public and their constituents, board members will hold to the highest level of professional conduct and ethical conduct, including emphasizing the positive aspects of the district. Thumbs up, thumb sideways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Is this in the packet that we're looking at?
Yeah, you have to go another page because he covered a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, I skipped the video and some of that other stuff. Sorry.
So what page are we on? Okay, I see it.
So do you all go out and visit schools?
Yes.
Excellent. That's good news, because you want to provide support and encouragement, you know, that helping support your superintendent, supporting your teachers, and then also learning about those. So A suggested protocol when visiting schools. When individually visiting schools or departments, as a professional courtesy, board members are encouraged to notify the superintendent that they will be visiting the school or department and may provide input to the superintendent on issues or concerns that may arise from such a visit. At no time while visiting schools shall a member make promises, either overt or implied, interfere with administration, or involve him or herself in personnel issues, student records, or union activities. To assist in this matter, the superintendent will ensure that principals and teachers know that a teacher does not need to interrupt his or her lesson when a visitor is in his or her classroom. How do you feel about all this?
Should there be frequencies or schedules of when we might show up? It seems to me like it might distract teachers or other people at the school.
I would suggest that you don't have those frequencies or schedules, and the reason behind that is, Sue, you may be able to go out to visit the sites every other week, but Rob is extremely busy and he can't even get out to visit the sites. And so if we start making schedules of individual board members, some board members, because of their personal circumstance, may feel bad that they can't make it out there, and it makes them look bad.
That's not what kind of a schedule, the kind of schedule I was talking about is just that people would have some way of knowing that this day is a visit is a possibility, not a commitment,
So my suggestion is that if you want to visit a school, that you contact Jen and say, hey, I want to go visit a Hoopa High School or whatever it is, and you have her make the arrangements. If you don't have a culture of just dropping in on schools, I don't suggest you create one of those. I suggest you work through Jen to do exactly what you're talking about there, Sue, and scheduling your visits there. And then you can decide if you want Jen to go with you. Right now, I'm bringing board members with me on virtual visits to classrooms. And so we pop into classrooms together virtually. You can do.
Fred?
Yes.
Fred, this is Lauralee. I have found that when I have gone to visit classrooms, I disrupt the classes, even though I try not to, but people will stop and it's, so I've limited my visits because of that, because I have not wanted to disrupt the flow, yet been requested by a number, union to stop by and see what the teachers are doing. But so there needs, I think with Jen knowing that we're not wanting to interrupt their lesson, that would be a big help.
Want to add something on here? Because right now you're encouraged to notify the superintendent. You can make that a stronger word and say that board members are to schedule with the superintendent.
I think by changing that, I think you'll discourage board members from actually making those visits.
Yeah, I agree. And I haven't contacted the superintendent. I've always contacted the principal first, because the principal knows what's going on in the school. And I can say, well, I have a question about something. Can I visit your upper grade classrooms? And, the principal knows whether or not it's much easier with.
Carrie, are you seeing me starting to twitch a little bit here?
No.
As a superintendent, I start twitching when I have a board member say that they're contacting a principal to go visit the site. And here's the reason behind that is because kind of like what they talked about with the special education director, is that you could contact the principal and say, hey, I really would like to come visit your site. And you know what that principal is going to do? They could be in the middle of creating their student accountability report card that Jen said is due tomorrow, or they could be in the middle of who knows what that's super essential. But as soon as Carrie calls and says, I want to come visit the school, you know what they're going to do? They're going to drop everything because they want to accommodate you and help you go visit the school. To me, that's Jen's job. And so if you contact Jen, she can talk with the principal and say, hey, Carrie wants to come out and visit the school. What's your schedule like? And the principal's not going to have the same, I'm going to drop everything attitude in the conversation with Jen that they're going to have with you. And so that's why I start getting the twitching. You all, whether you realize it or not, wield a big amount of power when you start talking to staff. And they're going to drop everything and do. And in fact, I explicitly tell my staff, if a board member calls you, drop everything and do what they ask you to do and call me immediately. And so, because I want to know.
So I have a question and I need some clarification or some assistance. How do you pull back that presence and be a parent? You know, because in normal times, I would need to drop into the classroom to make sure that my child was not being naughty or disruptive, which she sometimes is. So how do I pull back and just be a parent?
There's the $1 million question. And that's one of the really disappointing things about being a board member is you give up a bunch of rights as a parent. And that's one of them, because the teachers and staff just won't see you when you come to their classroom as a parent anymore. They're going to see you as a board member. And it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, you're still a trustee. And it makes it really hard. And I think, I'm not sure if you're here when I talked about this in the beginning, the rights I gave up with my children as far as being the superintendent and their dad. When we have an issue in a classroom, I don't deal with it at all anymore because the teacher sees the superintendent walking in to have a conversation with them. I have my wife go do it. And it's
so I'm a little puzzled by that too. I just simply because of the area that we live in. I'm a grandmother who has the primary responsibility of Zoom meetings with teachers and picking up lunches and stuff like that. So, you know, I often am on campus. And so I'm just kind of puzzled. Like I wouldn't call Jen and say, I'm going to go over and pick up lunches today. Can you let them know? You know, and yet I have to do that.
If you're showing up at a campus in your role as a parent, no, you don't need to call her. You're going out to pick up your kids. If you're going out to pick up a piece of homework, if you're doing, my point in being a board member and a parent, it's nearly impossible to separate that. But if your business, let me give you an example. I had a board member who was the president of a local PTA, and she was at our school sites all the time supporting the PTA organizations. Man, I would have gone flipping crazy if she told me every time she was showing up on a site to do a PTA event or a PTA this or a PTA that. She was not showing up in her role as a PTA member. She was not showing up in her role, she was not showing up in her role as a board member. And so I didn't want to know. My point is, regardless of if you're showing up in your role as a board member or a parent, they're always going to see you as a board member. But if you show up in your role as a parent, or if you show up in your role because your career, because you work with one of the tribes and they're doing some sort of outreach with the schools to bring the students in or whatever, you don't need to notify Jen for that because you're a completely different role. But if you're going out just to visit a site because you're interested to help inform yourself as a trustee, that's what she needs to know. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So I see
does.
Trying to get to
I use my visits on, I don't do it on purpose, but a lot of my visits to campus are one of the ways that I know what's going on at our school. Yes. And I don't intentionally do that, but you know, of course I know where, you know, I know the things that are going on because I'm a parent or a grandparent that goes there. So it's kind of, that's just really a tricky question or a tricky dilemma.
It is, but I would go back to, is the intent of your visit because you want to see what's going on in the school, or is the intent of your visit to be a grandma?
Okay, yeah.
The intent of your visit is to be a grandma and you have collateral information that happens at that time, and you just find out, it just is. That's okay.
Mhm.
Well,
Okay,
I think anytime you go to the school, you have to first check in at the office. And that gives the office an opportunity to maybe let the teacher know that you're there and see if it's a good time for you to come in or not, so that you don't interrupt. You know, just got into their quiet time reading or something. And when somebody does come in the door, as a teacher's aide, I know that, you know, kids see somebody coming in, either if it's somebody's parent or grandparent, you know, they all get excited and they want to maybe talk to them or something. And sometimes it is disruptive.
Mhm.
So here's what I just added, and maybe this will help you out. Does that solve your concerns? I put, when individually visiting schools or departments in your capacity as a board member,
Yeah.
as a professional courtesy. Does that work for everyone?
Mhm.
Yeah, but it still is a difficult task to separate that when you're dealing with their teachers or dealing with people that are dealing with your kids. You know, I'm still not sure how to be able to
And you're
do
gonna have
both, I guess.
Yep, you're gonna have to figure that
Yeah.
one out as you get into your role. And I think some of it will come to you as well. So can you support how we have it here now? With a thumbs up if you can support this.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. We're getting there. Board members shall not request any information from staff beyond that of which would be provided to any regular community member. Staff members are directed to relay requests from board members to their supervisor to ensure that appropriate information is provided to all board members. Management staff are directed to relay requests from board members to the superintendent to ensure that appropriate information is provided to all board members. This protocol does not imply a censoring of any private and informal conversations. And so again, this is under the subject heading of what's good for one board member is good for all board members. Can you support this?
Yes.
Thumbs up if you can support it. Okay. Board members' role in collective bargaining. Do any of you sit in collective bargaining? So no board members in collective bargaining. Okay. Board members will be actively involved in the collective bargaining process to ensure that the district is represented well by those selected to negotiate on behalf of the board and the community. The involvement of the board will be too. And I'll let you read those 2 points. You don't need me to read you everything. Okay, short of broadcasting, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Can you support this as it sits right now? See, 1 thumbs up, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I want to talk about broadcasting. And the reason that I'm talking about broadcasting is because you will get political pressure by the associations to sit at the bargaining table. Times you have some contentious negotiations. I think you're on the cusp of having contentious negotiations with your associations right now about compensation. It always gets contentious about compensation. You're all just doing your job as board members, and staff are doing their job, and the associations are doing their job too. And so it's nothing personal. Now, with that, they're going to come to you and say, you will not believe what's happening at the negotiations table. You need to sit at the negotiations table so you can see how egregious the district is being. So you can see all these lies that the attorney is coming to the table and bringing. So you can see this or you can see that. My suggestion on how you handle that is not sitting at the table. As a superintendent, I've sat at the table when a board member is there. It throws the superintendent off their game. And this is why it throws the superintendent off their game. What happens is I found myself every time I went to make a proposal looking at the board member because I want to know what their reaction was. The board is my boss, is the superintendent. That individual board member, it's usually not the whole board that's in there, but the individual board member isn't my boss, but you're a board member. I still have that tendency for that to happen. And I don't want to be second guessing myself through the negotiation process. So with all that being said, my perspective is if they say all this is happening, let's virtually broadcast this to all the stakeholders, meaning let your teachers watch it and us as a board make it available for us to watch as well. And so that's an opportunity for you not to sit at the table, but to view exactly what's going on at the table. It should not be open up to the public, but it should only be opened up to the Teachers Association or the Classified Association, and then along with you as board members. I have yet to ever have an association agree to do this. But it stops the conversation of you don't care, you're not willing to watch.
You've never had an association agree to do that?
Nope.
And they have the ability to say, no, we're not willing to be broadcast?
Yes. And you wouldn't want to force that upon them anyways. That is a condition of bargaining, and so you would have to have the agreement for that to happen. The rationale generally, I don't know the dynamics of your district, but the rationale generally is they want board members in negotiations so they can negotiate directly with the board. And you don't want that as a board, from my perspective. But this gives you the ability to see what's going on inside there and what's happening. And it also gives the whole board the ability to watch the negotiations, because if only one board member's in there, you end up hearing through the filter of that one board member, and the one board member knows much more information than everybody else. And I would never encourage the whole board to negotiate.
So is this something, who are our district personnel who are involved in those negotiations? Is it the superintendent and an attorney, or who is it?
I'll let Jen answer that.
There's myself and an attorney, and depending on if it's with the classified unit or with the certificated unit, there's different staff negotiating on the negotiating team. So I have a principal that goes to the KTTA, the teachers union, and a different principal that goes to CSEA with me, and I have the assistant superintendent. So there are two different teams, but I'm on both.
Okay, you and the assistant superintendent and the attorney are on both teams?
Right.
Okay.
So I would suggest on this portion, I don't think that that's going to have as much of an impact on the protocol. I would suggest that Jen, you schedule in your upcoming closed session a conference about labor negotiations, so you can get the new trustees up to speed on what the district does and what your teams are, and you can answer these very individualized questions about collective bargaining. Sue, does that work for you?
Yeah, well, what I'm wondering is, has the subject ever been broached with the unions? The suggestion of broadcasting the negotiations instead of having board members there?
I would highly doubt that it's ever been brought up. This is something unique that I brought to the table as a part of a team when I was down in the Central Valley because we had tremendous pressure from the association to bring the board to the table, and this was our solution, and it worked very well. We have this protocol here in Eureka now, and neither of those districts have ever wanted to do it, but our board is more than willing to do it if that's what they want to do. We have nothing to hide as far as what we present and what we talk about at the collective bargaining table.
So did you just say that you've never had an association agree to it?
That's correct.
But you've offered it?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Did you say that you've used this process where you were before?
Use this
Or
protocol, but it has never, the association has never agreed to broadcast their negotiations. I would love for them to do that because I would love for my board to see firsthand exactly what happens in the negotiations room and exactly what's talked about, because they can provide clearer parameters without having to be drawn into the negotiation process.
It seems like the association members would want that too.
Maybe they'll go for it. That'd be great.
If because they would also want to know what goes on, how they were represented in the negotiations.
In general, however, the negotiating team does not want their members that involved in that business because they have a very specific strategy that they're employing, and they're concerned that their members are going to go ballistic based on their strategy that they're putting forward. Negotiations process is very complex. I don't mean that in a negative way as far as their strategy going forward, but the negotiations process is very complex. It's a dance, and you oftentimes will plant your flag in areas that you're, as a teacher, your team would be going, why the heck are you planting your flag there? But it may be a very specific strategy that you're employing in the negotiation process that a John Q teacher may not understand.
is there a reason why it's not just, could not just be broadcast to board members? Is there a reason why the association would need to broadcast it to its members?
You can do it however you want, but if you all are seeing it, why shouldn't their folks be seeing it? Because and here's my intent. What's going to happen is you're all going to see this. The teachers are going to come unglued and come to the board meeting because they're unhappy that you won't give them the 3% and you've only offered 2% or whatever the rationale is. And they're going to come crucify you and say, you've been watching these sessions, they've been horrible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're going to be talking about something that they haven't watched. And as a board, when it gets contentious like that, I would want to be in a position where I could say, well, tune into negotiations because that's not what happened. That's not what I saw. And if they're not watching the same thing that you're watching, you can't say that. It's my dream that someday our association will say yes to this. I don't think they ever will. And if your association said yes to this, I'd say that is fantastic. I think it could go a long way to building your relationship.
Well, I suggest that we move forward, and we're not requiring, it's just recommending that it be broadcast. So I'm in favor of that, and the concept of time here to move forward.
Okay, so there's a thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, you can live with it. Okay.
Sideways, not down.
Yep. Okay. Establish a bargaining approach. So the board, this is board's rule still. Establish a bargaining approach, meaning adversarial, positional, interest-based, etc. That should all be discussed in closed session. Set the parameters for the district bargaining team. Expect the representatives of the board that the superintendent will ensure that the board collectively and individually is informed on the issues, strategies implemented within the process. And the superintendent is the collective bargaining spokesperson to the board. This is all pretty standard stuff. Can you live with it?
What has been the bargaining approach in the past?
Your positional bargaining all the way. And it would be fantastic if you could make it to interest-based bargaining. And I would suggest as a part of your goals to Jen in her evaluation process that you push her towards trying to establish an interest-based bargaining approach with the association.
Can we get some working definitions of positional and interest-based?
So positional is the district's going to offer 2%. We want 5%. All right, we're going to caucus, talk about it, come in with a new proposal, caucus, come in with a new proposal, caucus, come in with a new proposal, and you come in with your position. Interest-based is where the teams work together, and generally you have a mediator who is an interest-based bargaining professional, and you come in and you talk about your interests and what your proposal is. And very rarely do you have a caucus. And instead of coming in and saying, like for instance, we would like 5 days of professional development and taking that as a position, you would come in with, we want more days of professional development. This is why we want the more days of professional development. Here's how we want to do the professional development. And it's a conversation back and forth about massaging the language without ever coming in, planting a flag, planting a flag.
Okay.
That's the difference.
So it's more based on
Relationships.
conflict resolution or relationship building than, you know, when you start out at opposite ends of a spectrum, it's about working toward resolution rather than winner take all.
I've been working, you all know Eureka. Eureka has been a highly unionized district for years and years, way prior to my time here. I've been working towards interest-based bargaining in this district for 9 years. We are finally pretty much there, although the association fails to call it interest-based bargaining at this point. It may fall apart the next time we go to talk about money, but you can get there. Our teachers haven't done, I'm going to jinx myself, but our teachers have not done an informational picket now in over 5 years because we sit down and talk about stuff. We have informals every month. We talk about the issues that are at hand, and we try to be proactive about and discuss how we can get to a resolution before they become a problem.
So I'm assuming there's a lot of foundation building in terms of trust building and transparency and stuff like that that precedes interest-based bargaining.
Absolutely. But you need to charge Jen with starting the foundation of building that trust. So that's a great conversation as far when we get down towards the evaluation area. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but that's something that you may want to talk more with me about in the future, and I'm certainly willing to do that. So as far as where we're at right now, can you support these protocols? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're there. Board's relationship with the superintendent. The board will commit to work through and with the superintendent on issues regarding running of the district. The superintendent will inform the board as soon as possible of serious, I'll let you read through those. This is her responsibility. Communication is key for her. And I've talked to her. You all know I work with her and advise her, and I talk with her a lot about this. See 1 thumbs up, 2, 3, okay. It's the superintendent's responsibility to organize the staff in a manner that best serves the needs of the district. As a professional courtesy, the superintendent shall provide the appropriate notice to the board in advance of an action being taken. Let me give you a for instance. I want to change the principal from pick your site to a different site. They're both employees of the district right now. That is her prerogative to happen. As a professional courtesy, she'll reach out to you and say, hey, next year, starting the first year, such and such is going to be the principal at Hoopa High School, and such is going to be the principal at whatever. I'm going to switch them. She'll let you know about that. She'll tell you why. And of course, if you don't want that to happen, you tell her why you don't want that to happen. But that is a management right of the superintendent. Anybody have a problem with that? I see 1 thumbs up, 2, 3, 4, looking for a 5th.
I'm just wondering what, I mean, isn't it up to her anyway? Why would we have to?
Because you don't want, This is if a principal comes to you and says, what the heck are you doing? Why did you let her do this? This allows you to say, it's in our protocols, this is her decision. And it allows her to say when a principal says to her, or a vice principal or whatever, why are you doing this? Because I have the authority to do this. So it just reaffirms that.
So the purpose of this protocol is to underscore that it is the superintendent's responsibility to make staffing assignments
of people that currently work for the district. She can't just go out and hire somebody from outside the district to be the principal. You as a board have to ratify that. But if she's making staffing changes within the district, she is able to do that. That's what it affirms.
And we want to know when the staffing changes are being made, because maybe we might take issue with something, and it's a good thing. I don't want to be surprised by something that happens and go, oh no, you shouldn't have done that.
Right. Can you live with it?
Does the, I'm just gonna make up a story. If the board were notified of an intended action of that sort and anticipated it might result in some sort of legal action against the district, then what do we do?
Well, I'll tell you what, Jen better know if it's going to result in some sort of legal action against the district before she ever brings it to you. Because if she puts you in a position where she's switching people around and she's not acting within the parameters of the law, she's got a problem as being a superintendent. Mm-hmm. Just to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see 1. I'm still looking for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have a 5th? 1. I still only see 4 out there. So where are you at, Sue?
I'm trying to understand
Debbie?
an actual scenario, how this would come up and whether.
I've got my 5th. So I'm going to move.
Okay.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. I think this is an important one. All conflicts between the superintendent and the board will be handled in closed session, with the superintendent being in attendance when appropriate and necessary. There's times when it's not appropriate. There's a sexual harassment charge against the superintendent. Or if you're talking about firing her, there may be a time when she's not in closed session. But if you have a conflict with the superintendent as a board, you need her there. She needs to be there unless there's some legal reason why she shouldn't be. On the flip side, if there's a conflict between an individual board member and the superintendent, it's your responsibility to reach out to her and meet with her individually and not bring it back to the rest of the board. That conflict is between the two of you, not between the board and her. There could be a time where there's conflict between the board and her, and that needs to be addressed in closed session. But if you have an individual conflict, please don't drag other board members in there and you deal with that conflict with her directly. Can you live with that?
I have a question. What are we talking about with individual? I'm not clear on that.
Jen, why the heck did you fire this teacher who is a probationary teacher? That was absolutely ridiculous. She taught my daughter this year. She was the best teacher ever. And I've got a real problem with you about that. Or why, that's actually probably not a very good example because that's a personnel item that should handle it close about that teacher. A conflict with Jen because you don't like how she did something, some stylistic thing that she did that you just don't like, that just really bugged you and you're angry with her about it. Or why did you tell such and such that I said this? Or, you know, something that is an individual conflict between you and her that's not a professional conflict between the whole board. An example would be you're angry with her about how she addressed you in a board meeting. I've had a conflict with a board member in an open session before, and our conflict resulted in us being very angry at each other. I was disappointed with her style and how she handled the board meeting. She was disappointed in me and how I handled myself as a superintendent. And we sat down and met the next day and worked through it. Because it was a conflict between me and her at that board meeting, and the conflict was non-existent with the rest of the board. And so what this says is that you would individually sit down with her as opposed to advocating for a closed session to have the whole board there to address why you're angry with her.
That makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So thumbs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're there. We're getting close, folks. I really wanted to do this. We're not going to have time to do it, but I'm going to explain what this is. You have it in front of you. This is a prioritization activity. I'm going to do a very abridged version. I'm going to ask you to take 3 minutes and choose your top 4 priorities in order in 3 minutes.
Okay, what page is this on?
It should be attached to the end of your packet, I would imagine.
I can't read it.
It says National Center.
Oh, I see it.
So let me see if I can do this.
It's after page.
Please, thank you.
Can you read it on the screen right now?
No, I need it a little bit bigger. Perfect. Okay.
So I'm cutting off student extracurricular activities a little bit right there. So I'll let you look at that and just rank your top 4. Don't give too much thought to this. I just want to make a point. It's okay if you don't have to plant your flag, and this is absolutely my top priority.
Do you want them in rank order or just choose the 4 we think are most important?
Rank order, please. So number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Okay. Laura Lee, what's your number 1? Maybe not quite there. Who has the number 1?
I have to unmute. Career and technical education.
Great area. Thank you. Carrie, what's your number 1?
Physical, mental, social, emotional wellness, and health.
Great. Kadusha, what's your number 1?
Physical, mental, social, emotional wellness and health.
Fantastic. Martha, what's your number 1? Oh, you're muted.
The physical, mental, social, emotional wellness, and health.
Great. Thank you. Debbie?
Mine is number 1, English and Language and Arts.
Thank you. Rob?
The career and technical education.
All right. Great. So what's Jen supposed to do? You all have a different number 1 priority. What is she supposed to do as a superintendent?
We don't all have a different number 1 priority.
There's a couple overlapped. I agree. But
Great.
there was at least 5 unique different number 1 priorities.
Yeah, but I think I could convince you guys.
Yeah.
I agree. You hit the nail right on the head. My point by this is you need to come together as a board and you need to determine what your number 1 priorities are. And you know what? I bet Kadusha could convince you all. or at least have a heck of an argument to convince you. But without that conversation ever happening as a board, what is Jen supposed to do? Who does she listen to? When you come as an individual member and say, CTE is my most important, or social emotional health is my most important, or English is my most important, and they're all important, what does the staff do?
Well, you asked us for our 4 most important things, and I'm thinking that some of us are going to overlap in our next 2 that weren't our number 1, but were maybe our number 2 or 3.
Right, but Jen doesn't know any of this stuff because
Okay.
you never as a board created a prioritization on what your most important things are.
That's true.
And so that's my point as a superintendent. If you don't want to drive your superintendent nuts, you need to get to a point someday where you pick the priorities of the district. And let me take this one step even further. If you look at what is driving your budget these days, it's your LCAP. And let me ask you a question. I heard in the beginning that you have a board member that's on the committee for the LCAP. And those of you that have been on the board for a while, when you get to your LCAP, you remember when the LCAP is approved? June. You have a public hearing for the LCAP towards the end of June, and then your LCAP is approved at the same time your budget is approved, because your LCAP and your budget work intertwined with each other. They drive each other. And what happens in the writing of an LCAP is you send staff off, and you may have a board member or 2 in on that committee. Great, that's fine. And they write your LCAP. And so what has happened in your district is you have just delegated the prioritization of your district to staff. And for me, from my perspective as a superintendent, and my perspective as if I was a board member for you, that's something that I don't want to delegate. I want to drive the priorities of the district. And so you have to get ahead of your LCAP and provide the direction to your LCAP writing team. Here are the priorities of the district, and expect them to write the LCAP in the prioritization of what the board is. And so many districts, in my opinion, miss the boat on that. It is so important that you do that. And so I encourage you to think about a way to do that in the future. The way we do it here in Eureka City Schools is we have a strategic plan that is adopted by the board prioritization wise each year in the fall. And then the LCAP writing team takes those prioritizations and writes it into the LCAP. And so I'm just going to leave you with that thought, something for you to think about in the future moving forward. We do not have anywhere enough time to be discussing that right now, but I highly encourage you to do that, because I know you all are very passionate about the students and doing what's right for them. And so you need to convey that so your LCAP and your budget gets spent in that way. Because the reality is you have, let me ask this question before I say that. Jen, what's your budget? 4 million, is that right?
Everything, the whole budget, 20.
20 million?
Yeah.
I was way off, 20 million. Okay, so $20 million budget. It's a lot of money, huh? I guarantee you, you can buy anything you want. Anything you want with $20 million. The problem is you cannot buy everything you want. And so that's why you have to prioritize what you're going to invest in and what's going to be most important for KT. Enough preaching. I'll get off that soapbox. So board's relationship with the superintendent, again, I promise we're almost there. The board commits to completing an annual evaluation of the superintendent. When's the last time you all as a board did a superintendent's evaluation? Did you evaluate John Ray every year?
No, we didn't do it every year. We did it every couple of years.
Okay.
He was with us, I think, for 5 years.
I encourage you to evaluate your superintendent every single year. It is so important. So your superintendent knows whether or not she's following in the direction you want her to go. And it's super important for you to check in with her on goals. The board will set aside at least one special meeting in January, and we could talk about this in the future, for the purpose of completing the annual evaluation of the superintendent. There's an argument for doing it in November. The argument for doing it in November is if you evaluate her now in January, you have brand new board members that have barely worked with her at all.
Mhm.
So the argument could be said that this should be done in November as you move forward. In consultation with the superintendent, the evaluation process and associated documents will be developed and approved by the board not later than the first board meeting in September. The evaluation process and instrument is designed to bring about the collective view of the board. Thus, the evaluation will reflect the majority view of the board as a whole.
Do we have the LCAP? Do board members have the LCAP?
So the LCAP would be part of the agenda packet that would have been done in June. So it could be out there. And so what I would say is, Trish, can you please forward out the LCAP to the whole board again? Remember, there was no LCAP for this current year, though. This LCAP will be a year old because this current year's LCAP was waived last spring because of the pandemic. So back to the superintendent's evaluation. Is this something that you all can support as a board? Is this something that you want to do with Jen and establish this process and make sure you're doing it every year? So I see 1 thumb, 2 thumb, 3 thumbs, 4 thumbs, 5 thumbs. Okay, we're there.
Do we want the special meeting in January? You said start it.
So that's a great question. And so the next question is, what time cycle do you want to use? Do you want to be on a calendar cycle, which is you evaluate January 1st to December 31st? That would put your meeting in January. I highly recommend that you should not have your evaluation meeting in May or June. The reason behind that is there could be a time someday when you don't want your superintendent any longer. No offense, Jen, but this is important to be said. If you get to that point, from my perspective, you owe it to your superintendent to let them know at the latest in January. It's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for the superintendent. That way they can make a career change, and it's more likely that you will leave each other on peaceful terms rather than you getting very late in the year where it's harmful for both of you. So the argument could be that you want to do it in November. So if you have a change in board members, it's the old board evaluating the superintendent as opposed to the new board evaluating the superintendent. That's a judgment call by all of you. Where would you like it?
Do we have new board members every year?
Every 2 years. So not every year, no.
And they're not all new board members, just some of them. So like next year, there's going to be some of us, or 2 years from now, there's going to be some of us that are going to be changing. But you never know. I mean, something can happen to somebody that's, yeah.
Terms of office are staggered, though, is what you're saying.
Yes.
It's a 4-3. Yep.
Well, it's supposed to be a 4-3, only this year it was a 5-3 because some of us got changed from being on the odd year to the even year.
So what do you want to do?
I would say the November.
I agree.
Okay. So
we need to set our evaluation. We need to get together and work on our evaluation form and agree on that.
So let me get there in 1 second. I just want to get a thumbs up. Do we have 5 for November? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're there. Now, the next question is, this is not a sales pitch, so I don't mean it this way at all. You can do a couple things. You all can do your own thing with your evaluation and objectives, or you can bring in somebody to facilitate evaluation and objectives, or you can work with Jen to do the evaluation and objectives. Those are 3 options. So if I were to come in and help you with, I lost my link. For some reason, my link went away. Anyway, I won't spend a lot of time with it, but I can show you how I can help you through an evaluation process. And the way that would work is I have a sample evaluation tool that we would customize with you. I have sample goals and objectives that would be customized to the board. We would meet in closed session. Once those were all finalized, we would have Jen come in. We would provide those to her, and then you would give her clear direction on where you want to go as one option. The other option is somebody on the board acts as a facilitator of that, and you meet and come up with that, and you do the clerical work to make that happen. The other option is you have Jen bring you a set of goals, and you work from that. So something to think about. You don't have to make that decision right now. I suggest you make the decision really soon, because if you're going to evaluate her in November, that needs to happen really soon. The other thing, you all should have a copy of her contract right now. I think you have an evaluation tool that's there. Do you like that evaluation tool? I don't think she has objectives right now, because I don't think that's happened. I think the reality is, if you don't have either somebody from the outside come in and help facilitate it, or if Jen doesn't do it, I just don't think it's going to happen. And so I encourage you to think about that and do something with that. Her contract as well. My recollection is your contract says for a 2-year term. Is that accurate? So my suggestion to all of you as a board is you need to make a decision this January as to whether you want to continue to keep her. Because if she's a superintendent that is here next year and doesn't have a renewed contract, that makes superintendents nervous. My contract always goes in front of the board when there's 18 months left on it. And then the board takes action for a contract to be acted upon at the end. A different way to look at that is you hire your administrative team all the time under 1-year contracts. You're asking your superintendent to do some very controversial things for the district. And that's something that you need to think about as far as where you want to be as a board and showing your level of support for her. So those are all things that can be talked about. Those are all just generalities, because remember, we're in open session. We don't have time. I'd planned on going into closed session with you for a little bit. We just don't have time to do that today, but those are all things for thought, and you all can be thinking about. You can talk with Jen about that and provide some direction on where you want to go with that.
Are we going to talk about the aforementioned very controversial things we're asking her to do?
Not right now, no. We could go into closed session if you would like, if there's things that are controversial that impact her evaluation and those sorts of things. That's something.
I thought you were saying there are, and I didn't know what you were talking about. So.
Oh, I'll tell you, every superintendent's asked to do very controversial things all the time. And anytime you go into collective bargaining, it's controversial. Anytime that you're asked to carry out a decision that all the constituents don't agree with is controversial. It's the lifestyle of a superintendent. I'll never complain. Nobody forced me to sign up to be a superintendent. I don't think anybody forced Jen to sign up to be a superintendent. It comes with the job, but we also need that protection to know that the board supports us in our roles and what we're doing.
Okay.
So in January, can we schedule this closed session meeting?
I assume.
What do we have? We have to get going in January. I guess I'm trying to make sure that we have what we need in place in January.
Yep, I assume she's talking to you, Jen.
Are you asking to set a date, or I have my calendar out always, but
I don't have my calendar.
At our January meeting, then would we set a date for like, I mean, is that under the kind of study session, even though it has a closed session part?
That would work for me.
My recommendation is that you take into account, now that you're going to do theoretically, your meetings, although this isn't approved yet, your meetings differently. You're going to start your open session at 6 o'clock. You do this, you add superintendent's evaluation to the closed session meeting prior. That affords an opportunity. Only staff that's in that closed session meeting about the superintendent's evaluation is just the board and just the superintendent. And then you all talk about how you want to move this process forward and set up a timeline and timeframes on how you want to do it. Discuss whether you, of those three options, which way you want to do it. And then you need to definitely develop a timeline of when her evaluation is going to happen. When the goals will be done, when the evaluation is going to happen, when an update's going to happen. There's several components to it that need to happen, for sure.
Okay.
So what happens when somebody violates a protocol? It's going to happen. It's possible. You know, we all make mistakes. You all need to self-monitor your own behavior. Behavior in conflict with these agreements erodes the trust. A behavior that's not challenged is condoned. Confronting other team members can be difficult. Also can be done damaging. If done correctly, it demonstrates that the board is a highly functional team. So this is definitely the self-monitoring piece. So ongoing, this is the protocol about new board members coming on, and I suggest you do this. An administrative orientation by the superintendent and senior staff will be provided to new members of the board. Training may be provided by county and state organizations, consultants, or led by staff. The training shall, whenever possible, take place prior to the first board meeting of the new board members. When we have a new board member come on in Eureka City Schools, no joke, some of you may be happy you're not coming to Eureka City Schools, we have 18 hours of professional development for the new board members. Each of our division puts on a 6-hour training for the board members to explain and try to get them as up to speed as quickly as possible of all the ongoing things that are happening in our district. It's so important for the board to be informed when they're making decisions. And even though you're a brand new board member, you carry just as much weight as a board member that's been there for 20 years. So the orientation is intended to be a conversation and overview of the things members need to know immediately. Questions will be answered in the board meeting structure. CEO contracts, CEO objectives, that's your superintendent, board policies, overviews of the services and programs, and the major challenges being faced will be outlined and discussed. Each orientation may be slightly different depending upon the needs and interests of the incoming members and the majority issues before the board. Can you all support this protocol? And this is basically setting up how you're going to train your new board members in the future. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, excellent. Within 90 days of the election or appointment of a new board member or appointment of a new superintendent, a study session of the whole board will be held for the purposes of reviewing or updating the governance protocols of the board. Upon the request of 2 or more board members, a special study session will be called for the purpose of reviewing or updating the governance protocols of the board. So this is basically how you address these in the future if you need to change something. And the reason if you have a new board member, it's important that they're reviewed is because think about all the things you thought about today that you probably haven't thought about. And so you just need to make sure that your new board members are on message with what the new protocols are. So with that, if you can support this one, that brings me to the end of my presentation. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 4 thumbs up on this one. 5. Okay, we're there. So what's going to happen at this point is I'm going to work on putting together the protocols for the governance handbook. I'm also going to work with Jen on the outline of the board policy adoption process, and she'll bring that to a board meeting to get discussed. And then these will come back on a consent calendar for you to approve your board policies, and they're in place at that point. So the only thing that Jen, you should work through with the board is what time do they want your January board meeting to be? Do you want to follow the new protocol even though it's not adopted? Probably makes sense since that's your first meeting of the new year, but that's really up to you guys. And with that, I will open it up to any questions you have. Marathon meeting, really long day. I am impressed that you all stuck with me. I thought for sure we were going to do this in 2 half days. And so that's really a testament to all of your commitment to be here. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So any thoughts or questions, anything else?
Are we having another meeting with you in January? That's what I heard that we were going to do.
That was only if we didn't finish today. We finished today. We made it through. You powered through.
Okay, and what
I
if we,
thought we had a thing on the Brown Act in January.
I think that's CSBA or an attorney or something. It's not me.
Okay. Okay, so another thought that I have that came up here today is our strategic goals. I think they're 1999 model. And so we really need to go over some of our other documents at some point in time.
So I have, there's a couple questions if you all want to do it. First off, do you want a proposal on Jen's evaluation for me to facilitate it? So you can look at it at the board meeting in January. It's no obligation, so at least then you know what it is, and you can make that decision inside of that meeting, whether you want me to be a part of that, or if you want her to do it, so that way you have all the information. I'll be happy to put that together if you want that. If you don't, that's okay too.
A proposal, is that what you said? Would we like a proposal for you to mediate?
Not to mediate, to facilitate her evaluation process.
Yeah, it's a proposal, right? So you'd be laying out the
That's
scope
correct.
of work, how you would go about it. Yeah, I would like to see that.
I would like to see it as well.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
certainly. So I'll work with Jen and get her that proposal, and then she'll get it out to you. And then the next question is, as you move into the future, if you think that you want to do something with strategic planning someday in the future, we do a full strategic planning workshop where 3 of us come in and do that. That's something that you can think about in the future. It's a big process. I would not recommend you undertaking the strategic planning process probably for at least a year if you decided to do that, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of upfront work to get that all ready and to do. But we can certainly talk about that more at some point in the future. And that's really the piece that will drive your LCAP moving forward and drive the direction of the school. So we can certainly talk about that in the future if you'd like.
Thank you.
All right, well, hopefully you all found this helpful today, and it'll help you move the district forward. I think you've got a great superintendent, and I think you guys, I'm impressed with you as a board. I think you're going to do some great things moving forward. So good stuff. Happy to see it.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate all your work.
Absolutely. Nice talking with you all. Have a Merry Christmas. Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Before we all go, we do need a motion to adjourn.
I have a question before we adjourn. He had mentioned that that he does a little bit more training for his new board members. And I know I would really like to request a working session so that I can kind of get some more information on the school sites, programs that I might not know are happening, services that we're providing that we don't necessarily hear about all the time, but are important to know. So is that a possibility?
Debbie, were you going to say something? Unmute yourself, but if you want to give me direction, I talk with Fred frequently. I can absolutely arrange something. There's a number of organizations, but I feel like the National Council is very precise in addressing some of the issues. So
Yeah, I appreciate wanting to know more for our new board members, but also one of the thoughts I had, I've been on the board here a while now, is that in the principal's reports to the board, maybe if there were some format there on programs that they are having, student information. I think we can maybe in a working session or suggestions forward, pull some of that stuff, because really I don't know all of the programs that are happening at each school site. And I wait for the site plans just to see who all of the employees are in various school sites. Because that, I don't even know who is all working for the school. And that's, so when I'm out in the community, I have no idea half the time. But to get up to speed on those things, I think our principals reports, if we had some kind of a format of highlighting one of their, or what programs they have in place, what's work, you know, we're getting right now is what we've been getting are sometimes vacancy issues, building issues. Yes, those are important, but as far as the program, the educational program, we're not getting that much. And I know they've suspended testing, but every once in a while an update on where we are on the dashboard, that sort of thing. I think that would help us get a better handle on where we are. And also maybe, Jen, the ACLU recommendations, where are we at with those? What is our plan? Because I really feel that our district has been doing a lot. I do see the ACLU's recommendations as being very important, but they're coming from outside of our district, looking in versus what are we seeing from the district inside and what are we trying to do. There's a lot of issues. I personally have run into a lot of what I call boarding school PTSD as I was the acting superintendent and as I am on the school board, and I'm thinking about maybe even writing a documentation on what those issues are. So there's a lot of information coming from our teachers, from our experiences that need to go forward as part of the puzzle in moving our students forward. So we need to address and talk about what is happening in those areas. So I'm not sure where the exact arena is, maybe one of our working sessions.
I really do like the idea of the study sessions and the working sessions, and then I
Yes.
can get more direction about what you know, because there's just kind of the different tiers in terms of integrating information. If it's site by site, or if that you would like something that's integrated across the district that I could report to you, but that those kinds of decisions we could set up a specific meeting for.
Yes, the working sessions I think are going to be wonderful and help us get together our collective thoughts and move forward. Okay.
I really want to thank you all for all of your thoughtful comments and conversations.
Jen, I have one more question. So do you have an update on the status of our teacher in Hoopa Elementary that hasn't been hired yet, the 6th grade teacher? Have we made any more efforts to fill that position?
The position's not filled.
And I have gone on the websites looking at vacancies, and it's advertised, they're out there. I'm not sure. I've even reached out to other people to help us try to find some candidates for those positions, because not everybody knows where to go to look at the vacancies in the district.
You know, the other night at Laura Lee, I wanted to talk about that, you know, the Yurok Tribe Housing has housing available for teachers. And right now they have one house available for a teacher in the Tule Creek, you know, downriver Tule Creek area. It's just a process of application, and they would be on a priority list to get that house if it's needed for a teacher. It goes teachers, doctors, public safety officers, you know, nurses, those are priorities. So there is one house available.
And
That's good to know.
don't have to be a Yurok tribal member?
No, they're an essential.
Considered essential workers, yeah.
Yes.
Maybe this could be one of the topics in our working meeting also, so that we can, around our recruitment process and facilitate barriers there.
Yeah, I have some other ideas too that I kind of wanted to share. It seems like certain positions are flown and flown and flown and flown and flown in the newspaper and never get filled. And I don't know if that's just a perception or if that's actually what's happening. Some of them are part-time that maybe could be combined to make a more attractive, you know,
I think we have tried a number of things, but I think, again, this would be a good topic for our working session. We have to agendize what we're talking about, but I think that goes under recruitment and removing barriers and trying to get more employees. So that would be a good topic there. In January, I hope.
Mm-hmm. And I also wondered about just getting real innovative. If there are certain positions that are really hard to fill. I know when the Los Angeles Unified School District had a teacher shortage a number of years ago, they recruited people with bachelor's degrees and made them long-term subs while they completed a credential program pretty much on the job. And
I think, again, our district has been innovative. We've had a number of local people in programs earning their credentials while they're teaching. I think we've gained some very valuable local talent in that. So again, these are things that we need to give the superintendent direction on, and I think it'd be in a working meeting. So.
And I think maybe more public recognition of those programs. I'm not sure people considering teaching as a career or looking for jobs are aware that those opportunities are available here.
Okay, so I think we can put together a lot of things with our collective knowledge. So again, we have to be careful of what we discuss here that hasn't been agendized. So
I'm just
these are all we've all got, you know, we all have pieces to the puzzle to help solve it. So
okay.
Okay.
So for that to be put on the agenda, how do we agendize it?
In the working working session, we can put on there recruitment efforts.
Excellent.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion. Debbie did.
Was that Debbie that moved?
Yes.
Second?
I'll second.
Sue second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I forgot. We got to do a roll. Anytime we're on Zoom, we have to do a count. Okay. Carrie.
Aye.
I'm just going by my screen. I say aye. Sue.
Aye.
Kadusha.
Yeah.
Debbie.
E.
And is Rob still on?
Yes, I think. Nope.
No?
He headed
Okay.
out.
So, did I get everybody that's here?
Did you?
Okay. We are